First of all, we congratulate China as president of the 9th session of the IRENA Assembly, and as vice president, we will work together with all in order to make this very important assembly a big success. We also congratulate IRENA Director General and the staff for their really excellent work, not only this year, but also in the last 2 terms. And I would like to refer to the special partnership and excellent cooperation between IRENA and the European Commission, the European Union, including when we in the European Union were negotiating and setting the new renewable target for 2030. Second, in this context, the legislation for the promotion of renewable energy in the 2030 perspective had just entered into force at the end of last year. As a consequence, by 2030, the European Union will use at least 32% of renewable energy. This is almost twice as much as today. It means large investment in all sectors of the economy. It also has a great potential to improve the daily life of European citizens. A cleaner air, more comfortable homes, more local and qualified jobs. The ambition will be supported by a new set of legislation. It will provide certainty to investors. It will further Europeanize our approach to renewable energy. It will support the active participation of energy consumers and communities. The new market design will allow energy systems to integrate a rapidly increasing share of renewable power. We are already at 30% in the European Union, and we expect to be around 55% by 2030 of electricity generated by renewables. In addition, the new legislation will specifically foster the development of renewable energy in transport, but also in heating and cooling. As a consequence, the share of electricity in the European Union final energy consumption will more than double by 2050. Third, we also have to look beyond 2030. And last November, the European Commission presented a strategic vision for Europe to become the world's first major economy to go climate neutral by 2050. The strategy is necessary to meet the long-term temperature goals of the Paris Agreement, and as you know, energy has a central role to play, representing 55% of greenhouse gas emissions, but being also present at the heart of all key sectors, transport, industry, building, etc. The contribution of IRENA, for example, with these case studies, has been extremely useful in demonstrating that such ambitions are realistic and desirable if we will also facilitate access to technologies and finance. With the continuous rapid growth of renewables, IRENA role will continue to grow, and your role as a multilateral organization will become even more important. We therefore pledge all full support of the organization and look forward to the next stage of IRENA development. European Union is ready to share its experience with all partners in the world. Thank you very much. The European Union expresses its gratitude to the Director General of IRENA and its staff. We will build on his achievement to ensure that his legacy contributes to the further development of renewables in the context of the global energy transition.
Excellencies, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this edition of the EU Energy Day here at the World Future Energy Summit. As many of you know, it is already a tradition, almost a tradition of a new year for us, the European Commission, to organize a EU Energy Day in this prestigious forum. And I'm pleased to see that you are very numerous here, and also very pleased to see that many are following us from web streaming. Our objective with this event is, in Abu Dhabi, is to, on one hand, bring you the latest developments in the field of renewables from Europe, while at the same time listening from the international audience that gathers here in Abu Dhabi about exciting projects and developments in your own countries. We believe that there are tremendous opportunities for cooperation amongst governments and the private sector, and we see the EU Energy Day as a great platform to bring people together, strengthening existing bonds and initiate new relationships. For this year, we have chosen the topic of sectoral integration. This is our discussion of today. Sectoral integration refers to coupling the buildings, the transport sector, and industry with the electricity sector through smart infrastructure, increasing the penetration of renewable energy and decarbonizing the economy. We believe that advances in sectoral integration will be crucial for Europe if we want to meet our own obligations under the Paris Agreement. We also believe that sector integration will be crucial for other countries, and especially for the Gulf region, to take advantage of the continued decline in renewable energy costs. In today's agenda, we would like to cover different topics. Firstly, we will address the politics of sectoral integration. Questions that we will be addressing include: why is sectoral integration important? What policy objectives does sectoral integration serve, and does it differ across regions and countries? And how we can create effective policies to support such sectoral integration. At a second moment, we'd like to share with you some exciting examples of sectoral integration that are already taking place at European level, at country level, and new solutions that are being developed by companies and local cities. And last but not least, the third part, we will be discussing technical aspects of sectoral integration as it is manifested in a number of concrete developments. For this purpose, we have invited a number of leaders in this area to share their views on the latest developments. I will introduce this session then when due time later on today. Ladies and gentlemen, I look very much forward to a very exciting afternoon and discussion with you. And I would now like to invite our ambassador, Mr. Patrizio Fondi, EU ambassador to the IAE, to take the floor and give some welcoming words, please.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I'm very happy to welcome you on the European Union Energy Day. It's the third year I'm here, and every time I come here is a joy, really, because I see many people, the number is growing, the interest is going up, and I think this week is becoming a big success. So I'd like to start by thanking the EU authorities for organizing this event, this Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, and for highlighting this year the clean energy. We recognize the EU efforts in that field, most notably in education and in knowledge sharing. This week is an annual event of utmost importance to us, as there is urgency when it comes to climate change. In the national newspaper yesterday, an article referred to the significant changes the Arabian Gulf would be facing because of rising sea temperatures, with research showing the world's oceans, and notably the Gulf waters, are heating up faster than expected. Clean energy is the driver for mitigation, and I'm proud to state that Europe is leading these developments. I'm also pleased to mention that the EU has agreed on a new regulation framework to support its clean energy transition for the period from 2021 2030. The European Commission has presented its views on the pathways toward the climate-neutral economy by 2050. The EU is not alone in its efforts towards a more sustainable energy system. The clean energy transition is taking place worldwide, and several initiatives have been implemented at the regional and global scale, aiming at sustainable development and tackling climate change. For example, you know very well the Paris Agreement. Given the changing energy landscape and the accelerating clean energy transition, we have broadened our cooperation with the GCC and MENA countries, as an example. We have therefore gone beyond the traditional elements relevant to trading in energy products, technologies, and policies. To this end, an EU GCC expert group was created and regularly meets to share the latest developments in our respective energy policies and technologies, with a focus on clean energy issues. Nevertheless, we also believe that our political dialogue must be underpinned by a tool in order to implement concrete joint initiatives in the area of clean energy between the two regions. To complement the activity of the Energy Expert Group, we launched the EU-GCC Clean Energy Technology Network. The network is designed to act as a catalyst for the development of cooperation on clean energy, policy, and technology among various stakeholders in the EU and GCC countries. The UAE and the other countries of the GCC are embarking on a clean energy transition pathway which targets more sustainable, efficient, and cost-effective methods of energy use. International cooperation and partnership are a key success factor. I'm glad to see active EU involvement with distinguished key experts in the clean energy sectors who plan to share case studies and best practices, as well as lessons learned in the region and beyond. I look forward to listen to this session, which aims to tackle the way policy support a more integrated approach towards the clean energy transition, including the GCC region. And finally, I would like to invite you to visit our pavilion and get to know more about the EU mandate in sustainability. I really wish you a big success for this meeting, and I hope to see you again maybe next year in the same context. Thank you. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your warm welcome. And now I will have the great pleasure of introducing His Excellency Dr. Matar Hamedi Al Neyadi from the UAE and the Secretary from the Ministry of Energy and Industry.
Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to come back for the next year, for the second year. Sorry. And I would like to appreciate and thank all the organizers who make this happen for the second year in a row. We are navigating in a transition period toward a clean energy future. There is no one simple solution, or there is no golden bullet that could be applied across the world. Each country had its circumstance, had its uniqueness. We could learn from each other. We could collaborate with each other, but each country would like and need to design a specific energy mix. The global energy landscape is witnessing rapid and disruptive change, driven by unprecedented growth in renewable and clean energy technology. According to IRENA, in the last year alone, a record-breaking of 168 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity was added globally. In UAE, for example, about 520 megawatt installed capacity is already being connected to the system. We believe the future of renewable and clean energy in the world particularly bright. and the European Union is widely recognized as a global leader in the transition toward a more integrated green energy future. However, we are also confident that as more solar and wind is deployed, as demand on gas, which is the cleanest fossil fuel, will grow. I am pleased with the level of cooperation that is taking place between the GCC and the European Community expert. As the Ambassador just mentioned, in 2 days' time, the GCC and EU meeting group will hold their meeting on Muscat to follow up the result of their October meeting that took place in Kuwait. We are committed to working together to explore the vast opportunity that lie ahead for collaboration between the GCC and EU in the field of clean energy, transportation, electrification, interconnection, and energy use and industry. I wish you all the best. I wish I could have more time to stay with you, but I'm confident that there is a lot of opportunity, there is a lot of experience, there is a lot of knowledge here could be exchanged among us for the benefit of all of us. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having been with us this morning. And now I'd like to call on Mr. Julian Robert Todorache from Romania, Secretary of State, representing the EU presidency. Please, the floor is yours. You can come over here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just running for 45 minutes to get here, so I'm sorry. But I'm very glad to be here. I did it at last, of course. Thank you. Yes, indeed, it's a pleasure for me to open this important event here in Abu Dhabi, what I consider to be one of the most important events in the renewable energy calendar for the year. The timing of this year's event is particularly interesting as we look to finalize new rules on the EU regulatory framework for energy policy and set the longer-term perspective for a low-carbon and climate-neutral economy in Europe. The issue of ensuring energy needs in line with environmental policies must focus, in our opinion, on three major pillars behind future global energy developments: energy security, energy poverty, and environmental problems faced by each state. Starting from this consideration, Romania, which has taken the presidency of the European Union, is now focusing on decarbonization of the energy sector by stimulating investments in energy efficiency and development of renewable energy sources alongside with other low-carbon energy technologies. Security of energy supply by diversifying sources and routes of supply. Ensure a sustainable energy price and protect vulnerable consumers. Supporting research, development, and innovation. Increase the competitiveness of the energy sector by reforming the electricity and natural gas market, improving the energy market mechanism, actively participating in the realization of the regional energy market and the European single market. On the assumption that the environment belongs to everyone and the unilateral effort made by the EU member states is not enough to protect it, we consider it necessary to make a global effort in this regard. Not only the efforts of the EU member states are sufficient to combat climate change, but this effort must be combined with the efforts of all nations. In recent years, as costs have come down, we have seen renewable generation capacity grow steadily by 8 or 9% every year. This has turned the industry into an important source of growth and job creation. We estimate that the renewable sector represented more than 1 million jobs in the EU in 2016, and this continues to rise. The Clean Energy for All Europeans package, which has been agreed on the end of 2018, creates a regulatory framework to enable Europe to lead the clean energy transition and to deliver on our Paris Agreement commitments. A binding overall target of 32% at EU level for 2030, established for renewables, we expect that this would result in around 55% of electricity from renewables by 2030. This highlights that renewables technology will be the major player in the years ahead. However, the revised rules aim to seize the potential for renewables also in other sectors, such as transport or heating and cooling. Administrative procedures have been simplified. EU has made important steps for consumer empowerment by fixing for the first time at EU level a clear and stable regulatory framework on self-consumption. This will allow self-consumers, individually or as a part of renewable energy community, to fully participate in the market without being subject to disproportionate charges of procedures. Through new governance regulation, the EU established an architecture for the Energy Union and mechanism for achieving the Union's 2030 objectives, with member states being required to outline a national strategy and submit national plans on how to achieve these targets in order to maximize consistency and coordination across the EU. Achieving the clean energy transition will require important transformation on the energy system, characterized by more viable renewable energies, greater decentralization, and digitalization. The new electricity market design proposals will enable these developments and encourage the deployment of renewables. At the same time, we will only be able to reach the more ambitious targets agreed upon if we can attract the necessary investments, and most of it will have to come from the private sector. The energy transition will bring about a deep transformation of our economic model with societal impacts beyond the purely economic. This is why it needs to be inclusive and why we need to invest time and effort into continued broad public support. In order for the transition process to be successful, it is necessary that the technological challenges of adapting the entire energy system to the new type of system to be sustainably addressed while mitigating the socio-economic challenges created by this process. The investment opportunities brought by this transition must be translated into economic growth and in the increase of the environmental standards that should be of benefits for both current and future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and I wish you a constructive discussion today, and thank you for the glass of water. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Once again.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. We'll now proceed with our panel, and I have the great pleasure of inviting the panelists to join me in the stage. And I'll start by Mr. João Galamba, State Secretary for Energy in the Ministry of Environment and Energy Transition from Portugal. Mr. Galamba, please. I'd also like to call Mr. Turki Al-Shari, Head of the Renewable Energy Development Office for Ministry of Energy from Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much. Frank Wouters, well-known, Frank Wouters, Director of the EU GCC Clean Energy Technology Network. Emmanuel Blanco from IRENA. Yeah, please. And last but not least, my colleague Felice Zaccheo, Head of the Unit Sustainable Energy and Climate Change at our DG, Director General for International Cooperation and Development in the European Commission. So we have this interesting panel. I'm sure that we have going to have interesting exchanges. And without further ado, given that they all want to have a presentation, I suggest that we start. And I would like to invite State Secretary for Energy from Portugal, Mr. João Galamba, to take the floor first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula. Good afternoon to you all. I would like to thank by congratulating the European Commission for this event and for all its work on the promotion of renewables and energy transition in the Union. The Paris Agreement on climate change represents a new beacon of light for the socio-economic evolution of the community of nations. Indeed, it is in this global context that the European efforts in favor of a modern, hypocarbonic and more sustainable economy should be looked upon. Portugal has strived to maintain a leading role in the fight against climate change. I have just had the opportunity to present Portugal's main policy goals at the IRENA event in the last few days. And we currently concluded the negotiation on the European Commission's clean energy and clean energy for all Europeans that has set forth the adoption of essential measures to address the vulnerabilities of the European energy sector in order to assure accessible, safe and sustainable energy to all European citizens and transform the EU into an hypocarbonic economy by 2030. As formally stated, the purpose is to have ambitious targets that will stimulate Europe's industrial competitiveness, boost growth and jobs, reduce energy bills, help tackle energy poverty and improve air quality. However, managing the transition to a more sustainable energy system is a challenging task. The decarbonization of the economy and energy transition must be seen as a mobilizing factor for all stakeholders, and I want to stress this, present a fair deal for consumers. Energy transition will not be politically viable if it does not involve a fair deal for consumers. We need consumers on our side and not looking at renewables and energy transition as something that hinders or endangers their way of life. It has to be something positive for all, and we believe that we can assure that and we can achieve that. In such a perspective, governments should have robust national energy and climate plans that define targets aligned with global strategies, promoting cooperation platforms to allow the dialogue between countries and international organizations. Accordingly, Portugal has outlined its chosen route with its ambitious integrated national plan for energy climate 2021-2030. In doing so, our country wants to give an unmitigated sign that is committed to maintaining its stance at the forefront of those that are tackling the extraordinary challenges that will confront the energy sector for the foreseeable future. Portugal today has around 55% of electricity coming from, on average, from renewable sources, and we want to move that to 80 on average by 2030. In March this year, we actually produced more than 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. It was only 1 month. On average, we produced like 55. We want to move to 80, and that means that the target for 2020 is 31% of all of the final energy consumption in Portugal coming from renewable sources, and our target is 47% for 2030. The global energy transformation, which is being spurred on by the accelerated adoption of utility-scale renewables, must be embraced as an exceptional opportunity to reimagine and redefine our economic development model. Portugal does not rest in its laurels as a pioneer of widespread integration of renewables in its energy mix. We believe that a concrete step that will further contribute to accelerate our energy transition will be the decision to hold regular auctions. And I wanted to do a parenthesis here, just say one thing, which is there is something that we in the Portuguese government consider a myth, which is the idea that in the beginning renewables needed feed-in tariffs, and now energy costs the technology costs have lowered so much that it's time to sell it at market price. We strongly disagree with this. Not because it shouldn't sell at market price, but because it should sell below market price. Selling at market price is a way to, it's not a way to favor consumers, it's actually a way for consumers not to take advantage of the lower costs of renewables. So market price is actually bad for consumers. We want to sell it at below market price, and auctions are an instrument to do it. By this way, if we look at Portugal now, the market price, the Iberian market price is around 60 euros per megawatt, and we had auctions in Spain at 30 euros per megawatt. So if we sold it at market price, consumers would be losing, not winning. So we believe that fixed rates coming out of competitive bids in auctions are actually the best way to bring consumers on board and show consumers that energy transition is actually an opportunity for everybody and also for them. It is well known, and I'm closing the parenthesis. However, it is well known that the electrical grid of the future will experience higher levels of load variability driven by non-dispatchable generation from renewable sources. Hence, there is a need to create confidence in innovative solutions that abate the concerns raised with the adoption of new energy frameworks. Indeed, some seem alarmed by the transition from a centralized system to a decentralized and market-based energy system that quickly promotes new technologies and business models. Yet, energy demand-side management initiatives and storage technologies, where the small portable batteries or local energy storage centers connected to smart grids at local level, including hydrogen storage, are currently well-known and available. It's a matter of supporting further research and to put in place the correct policy tools to improve the performance, decreasing the cost of these technologies and bringing confidence in their use. At the utility scale, investment plans to upgrade grids need to be focused on eliminating capacity constraints on par with the embrace of new technologies. The grid of the future has to handle bidirectional power flows to integrate smart meters and process large quantities of data. Furthermore, grid investment plans will need to incorporate a wide variety of new technologies like advanced inverters, grid management and dispatch tools, and grid-level energy storage equipment. In other words, the transformation that energy utilities must undertake requires significant planning and commitment. All of these considerations must also be enlightened by the search for energy efficiency. Energy efficiency has an undeniable favorable impact on reduction of production costs and should represent an investment priority. New energy technologies should enable the efficient use of energy in a cleaner way and at an affordable cost. It is crucial to demonstrate the viability and robustness of the new solutions to produce energy and disseminate these technologies worldwide. Companies that embrace energy efficiency through technological transformation create more value than those companies that are slower to respond. As a public actor, the Portuguese administration is attentive to the needs of its different industries and is a promoter of even greater investment in energy efficiency in production processes. In reality, the Portuguese industrial complex accounts for 28% of final energy consumption. In light of the imperative to decrease energy use in the sector, our country has put in place since 2008 its system of management of intensive energy consumption, with the aim of promoting energy efficiency and monitoring energy consumption of industrial infrastructures that have an annual consumption above 500 tons of oil equivalent. But it's not enough to accompany the efforts of energy efficiency in the private sector. Each state has to lead by example. This means that we must make sure that our buildings and infrastructures comply with the highest energy efficiency standards, with the latest innovative technologies that integrate renewable generation as part and parcel of any public investment. We consider the employment of advanced heating and cooling technologies a significant part of this global strategy, aiming for the transformation of the energy sector through demand reduction, with corresponding CO2 curtailment. And we are adapting our legislation in order to make it possible. In short, the future of the energy sector is complex and demanding. It must simultaneously be seen technically, scientifically, economically, and from a regulatory perspective, and, as I said in the beginning, from a political and social perspectives also. However, what is expected of us, private and public energy sector actors, is invariably to rise to the occasion at this momentous junction in world history. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. Two things I'd like to say to ask you. We are using Slido for questions. I forgot to mention that before, so please do not hesitate. You have here the codes. Please connect and for the questions you may have, and this also for those web streaming. And I would like also to invite you, in case you have questions you'd like to address specifically to Mr. João Galamba from Portugal, could you please raise your hand now, since he needs to leave in a few minutes to join another event. So if there is any specific question you'd like to ask him, I would invite you to do it now. It's not the case, so excellent. Thank you very much. We proceed. So now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Turki Al-Cherri, Head of the Renewable Energy Project Development Office from the Ministry of Energy in Saudi Arabia. We will be very happy to listen to you and see how is sector coupling being seen now in Saudi Arabia? How are things developing there? And also listen from you what sort of areas you see for cooperation together with the EU. Thank you. You want to take the floor here now, I suppose. Thanks so much.
Good afternoon, everyone, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today and to be amongst this esteemed group of audience. Today, what I actually would like to share with you is lessons learned from Saudi Arabia or the Kingdom of Saudi when it comes to sectorial integration. And I don't mean that in the sense that we have a complete solution. I mean that more in the sense that we've done enough mistakes, seen what happened around us to basically understand in what we believe today is a process getting us towards where we want to move when it comes to sectorial integration of renewables. Now, the Kingdom last week announced 60 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. We announced in the next 5 years, 27 gigawatts. Therefore, the concept of sectorial integration is extremely important in introducing this large amount of renewable energy in the country and ensuring it's done efficiently, it's done effectively, it's done economically, and more importantly, it is done safely. What I want to leave with today is basically one concept when it comes to sectorial integration towards the end of my speech. The concept of sectorial integration is very big. We can spend hours talking about the various areas that need to be looked at. However, what I'm looking at, or what I would like to talk about, is a governance perspective. And if we look at Saudi in particular, prior to 2016, prior to the release of the vision, if you guys are aware of it, we had several organizations working in various aspects across the government when it comes to the subject of sectorial integration. We had a Ministry of Petroleum, which was, amongst many other activities, was responsible for providing fuels to the utility sector. Therefore, renewables was obviously not a major importance to that ministry. We had the Ministry of Electricity and Water, which was responsible for everything related to electricity and providing electricity to its consumers. We had a Ministry of Commerce and Industry related to aspects of the industry. We had King Abdullah City for atomic and renewable energy, everything related to atomic and renewable energy. And we had an entity called Saudi Energy Efficiency Center, which was responsible for demand-side management, rooftop solar. Now, in the past 10 years, for those of you that are familiar with the Kingdom of Saudi, we spoke a lot about renewables, but not much was ever really deployed. We had targets, we had ambitions. And I would say a major challenge to why not much was deployed was because we had 5 different entities, each led by their own heads, with usually different objectives, different targets, and it was extremely difficult to align amongst these entities. However, in 2016, His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman announced the 2030 vision. The 2030 vision is an intense transformational program that covers everything within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. However, if we look at what it did for sectorial integration, the biggest component that I see that added value was the creation of a Ministry of Energy, Industry, and Mineral Resources. Now, everything that falls under sectorial integration doesn't necessarily fall within MEEM. However, most of the components do fall within MEEM. So, for example, I represent the Renewable Energy Projects Development Office. Our job is to simply execute renewable projects. That's all we look at. The role that we play under the Ministry of Energy when it comes to executing renewable projects is, prior to executing, we ensure that we provide all environmental permitting requirements needed prior to projects being tendered. What I mean by that is that we work with over 16 organizations, whether it's airports providing necessary glare studies, whether it's military zones, radars, aquifers, heritage sites. All this permitting is done within the ministry before it is tendered out to the private sector. Now, if you look at some countries, some nations require 5 years to get certain permits. 5 years in the renewable world is a long, long time. Renewables on an annual basis, we're seeing new technologies, we're seeing prices drop significantly. As such, we are able, through this process, we are able to tender projects fairly quickly. Within the same Ministry of Energy, we have the Saudi Energy Efficiency Center that's responsible for smart metering, rooftop solar. We have a complete restructuring happening within the national utility. They're also in charge of updating the control systems to comprehend or to cope with this introduction of renewables, much faster forecasting, how it integrates with conventional power. Therefore, as a result of being able to have all these entities working under one leadership, in our case, the Ministry of Energy, Industry, and Mineral Resources, we are able to prioritize our requirements. We realize that if we want renewables, we know that renewables to be deployed requires several other engagements and initiatives to take place under the concept of sectorial integration. So what I would like to leave with here is our lesson learned and how we believe that we are making track with respect to sectorial integration is the fact that we have one leadership guiding all these entities towards one objective. So it's either having that one leadership or another possible solution that I believe can be used elsewhere is one policy. We believe that you will need one policy in any nation that covers everything related to what you feel is necessary within sectorial integration to integrate renewables and sustainable energy. Otherwise, segregated entities looking at this from their own objectives did not work for us, nor do we think it'll work elsewhere. Thank you for your attention, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for your very interesting, inspiring intervention. I think we have a couple of questions on Slido directed to you, State Secretary. So it was a bit slow, but they came. So here they are. The first question is, in your new plans for 2030, is Portugal specifically looking at sectoral integration? Perhaps I'll go through the three. You have them there. And you can perhaps address them all together. Does Portugal consider auctions as a non-market system, given the reference made to below market prices when discussing the auctions approach? And then the last one, which is renewable investment costs, it's lower, but operating costs ours is lower. Payback will be bad with a lower than market price. Any incentives then to attract the investment? So I think you can address this in a row, no? From there if you want.
I'll answer the second. Is this on? Or
yeah, it's
yes?
on. It's on. Yeah.
I'll answer the second and the third. I said auctions are a competitive market mechanism, but it's different from the market price. The market price, what I said, market price is the marginalist market that we currently have, and it was designed specifically for fossil energy, and is dysfunctional with renewables that produce at zero marginal cost. So it is a market mechanism, but you fix the price in the auction, and you not the market is not determined by supply and demand as in the and as traditionally is in the marginalist markets that currently exist. And the last one, the answer is just pointing at what's happening in other countries. Spain did auctions at 33 euros per megawatt, and the average price in Mibel is close to 60. So we are not doing anything different than the Spanish did. If they were able to attract a lot of demand and they had successful auctions, we can do it also. I think I replied to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any follow-up question. If there is so, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we proceed and have the pleasure now to invite Frank Wouters, Director of the EU GCC Energy Technology Network. Frank, what we would like to listen from you is really in this area of sector coupling, sector integration. Do you see new areas for collaboration between the EU and this region? The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe a few words about the network. We are a network that focuses on fostering partnerships between Europe and the Gulf. And we have two political parents. So we're guided by input from the European Commission and the Secretariat General of the GCC. But basically, the type of activities that we deploy are relatively bottom-up. So we work a lot on demand. If somebody has a problem, we look whether it fits the program, and we become active if that makes sense for us. We have 5 main focal areas. We focus on renewable energy. We focus on energy efficiency, demand-side management, carbon capture and storage, the integration of electricity grids, clean fossil fuels, and then there is actually a 6th focal area, which is called climate change, but it's sort of cross-cutting because all the other areas, they are working towards less impact of us on the climate. We have working areas that support these areas and feed them with input when we do an activity. And it may not be a big surprise, but you can imagine that specifically renewable energy and energy efficiency and demand-side management have been the most popular areas for us to engage because there is just so much going on. The network has been in existence since 10 years, and I've been in the Gulf also almost 10 years. It's my 10th year now. And you may have heard Dr. Sultan in his opening speech this morning, the chairman of Masr. Then he was my CEO. I was director of clean energy, and I was one of the the initiators of the most expensive solar energy by a large margin in the region, which was Shams 1. And that was just the cost that we were working with in those days. We pushed it through, and it works fine. It's exceeding the production, but it was, and this is only 9 years ago. It was by a large margin a lot more expensive than everything else that we did in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi or anywhere else in the Gulf. And we also heard him say last week the announcement of a 2-cent 400 megawatt wind project, which was prepared by Turkey Al-Shari's group in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is being built by Masdar, and that's 2 cents per kilowatt hours. We've seen bids for solar PV in the Sakaka project, which came in below 2 cents. I mean, they ended up being a little bit more than that, but that's the reality we're seeing right now. And this is in a very, very short period of time. So we've gone from something that was factors more expensive to something that is now factors cheaper than the competition. And this changes everything. I mean, if we look at the situation in Dubai, where they're building the 5,000 megawatt Maktoum solar park, which is a combination of solar PV for the daytime power, which new plants will come in at less than 2 cents per kilowatt hours. Combine that with the nighttime solar coming from the concentrated solar power project, which collects the solar heat during the day in a very big salt tank, and then you have a steam cycle during the night, so you basically dispatch the solar energy at night. That comes in right now. It's being built for 7.3 cents per kilowatt hours. If we would do the same right now in the northwest of Saudi Arabia, where the irradiation conditions are 30% better than in Dubai, plus with the learnings and the lower cost, we would have around-the-clock solar energy for, I would say, 3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hours, which is cheaper than anything else. And then we have 24 hours solar energy cheaper than anything else. Now, this is not specific for the Gulf, but I must say that the Gulf has done a really good job at organizing projects. And this is something that, for example, in our network, it's not just because Europe started doing renewables a bit earlier that it's a one-way street. The way Dubai, the way Saudi now, the way also Abu Dhabi is organizing projects and is preparing for the auctions and then demands basically or creates this environment for competition leads to these world record low prices. And that is a really interesting development. So it's not just a one-way street. We learn from each other. I am pretty sure that Portugal has very carefully studied what Repdo is doing in Saudi Arabia and what DEWA is doing in Dubai and what avec is doing in Abu Dhabi. So one of the things, if we're talking about sectoral coupling, is thinking about what are we going to do with all that electricity. Because that we will have a lot more electricity in the future is a given. The fact that we now have so much cheap electricity coming from renewables, and the trend is contrary to other things that are resource driven rather than having a technology-driven approach, is that it will become cheaper over time. There is just nothing that will stop that. So we will have a dynamic which is progressive, and it will increase the level of cheap electricity in the future. I mean, the last year's Shell Sky scenario says that by 2070 we will have five times on a global level the generation capacity in electricity compared to now, and we will have 3 times more electricity. Of course, a renewable energy system produces less hours than something that runs on coal or gas, but it's still 3 times more electricity in 2070, driven by the fact that we need to decarbonize our energy systems. Then the question is, what are we going to do with all that electricity? And how does that electricity we have help us in also tackling some of the more, what we sometimes call incompressible sectors, heavy industry, transport, which are more difficult to electrify. And one of the things that we're starting to understand, and this is something that I've really seen develop and grow in the last year in terms of thinking how to tackle this new situation, is green hydrogen. And green hydrogen is something that you can make from green electricity. It's a very simple process. You basically take water, you take electricity in an electrolyzer, and then you can turn green electricity into a gas that you can then use in the less compressible sectors, such as transport, but also industry. You can make steel with green hydrogen. You can make fertilizer with green hydrogen. You can store it over a whole season. And another thing that is advantageous compared to green electricity is the fact that transporting green hydrogen is very, very cheap. If you take the gas pipeline that connects Algeria with Spain, and if you would use that one pipe to transport green hydrogen, it would have a capacity of 150 gigawatts. Now, 150 gigawatts is 150 overhead power lines. So that just shows you that the transport over longer distances of green hydrogen is extremely efficient, and we already have that infrastructure. So part of the thinking going forward is also using existing gas pipelines in our systems. And that can be done in the GCC, but also, of course, in Europe. Now, if we're looking at the forward projections for Europe, then there is not many scenarios right now that are cost-effective, that are secure, and that are clean, that do not have, going forward, a lot of green hydrogen in it. That's number one. And number two is, it is very likely that Europe will still need to rely on imports of even green hydrogen. Of course, now Europe is a net importer of gas and oil. It's unlikely that Europe will have the capacity to make all the green hydrogen that we need in the future on European territory. And this is, I think, another element of the relationship, the energy relationship between Europe and the Gulf, is that here you have the capacity, you have the intellectual capacity to produce gas at scale in the future, and you can make it clean because we have the lowest cost renewable energy. I'm really, really looking forward in exploring these kinds of options together with our friends from the Gulf. Thank you.
And now I would like to give the floor to Emmanuel Blanco from IRENA, and I'd like in particular if you could share with us IRENA insights and also the findings of your work in this area of sectoral integration, in particular when it comes to the challenges that it poses to policymakers, the complexity of the policy. So how IRENA is developing the thinking on this is very useful. Thank you for the discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emanuele Bianco. I work for IRENA, and I want to thank you, the organizer, for inviting me for this great event. So, for the few that doesn't know, IRENA is the International Renewable Energy Agency and works as a hub of knowledge and regarding policies and innovation regarding renewable energy. We aim to provide to policymakers the mean, the policy advice, and the knowledge to pursue the energy transition. And we do that for worldwide. We have 160 member countries. Canada has been the last addition to our family. And to discuss about sector coupling and the energy transition. We now say that we are in the energy transition, but if we look at the number, we see now that, yes, renewable energy capacity additions have surpassed the installed capacity of fossil fuels power plants since 2012. So we need to change our power systems to integrate more variable renewable energy, but at the same time, if we look at the actual numbers of the final energy consumptions, only 20% of our energy is consumed via electricity. 80% goes in the heating sector, in the direct use of energy, and in the transport sector. And these sectors nowadays are mostly fueled by fossil fuels, and in the renewable energy part by biomass. So we need more electricity for this direct use, for the heating and cooling, and for the transport sector. And IRENA is assessing these new challenges. We do it in a twofold way. We assess the policies that are needed for develop these new technologies, and looking at the innovations, at the new technologies that are now being developed and now present around the world. So, to answer your question, in order to have more demand-side integration, we need to have more flexible resources. And heating and cooling, thermal storage, electric vehicles are wonderful sources of energy flexibility, of system flexibility. But they will not be so smart and so able to cope with variable renewable energy if we don't change the rules of the game. Market design needs to change and needs to allow aggregators, electric vehicles, thermal storage operators to operate in the market and not only to buy energy, for example. We need to change the rules of the game, and we need to make the market design faster and more flexible. And at the same time, we need to change the institutional structures, because we cannot adopt a plan if the players of the system have not a real role clarity. And by role clarity, I mean a knowledge of what is their role in the energy transition. And we need to be sure that their objectives have been adapted to the energy transition. So IRENA is nowadays starting to assess these topics, and we are doing this on a daily basis, and we are very willing to continue this, and I'm very happy to be here to learn from you and to share our knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I'm sure that some of the things you said will trigger comments from the audience later on in the discussion. And to complete the panel, I'd like to now call on Felice Zaccheo, my colleague, dear colleague from the Department of International Cooperation and Development from the European Commission. And what we really would like to listen from you is how the European Union action in this space of international and development cooperation is looking at these important challenges that sectoral and sectoral coupling demand. Thank you very much. If you want, you can. If you prefer to, it's the same.
I don't want to look different. I just want to be the same. Thank you very much, Paula. You know, it's like to be at home here at the EU Energy Day, and it's a big pleasure to be here in this beautiful country. So thanks a lot. We had a very intense 3 days at the General Assembly, interesting discussion. And just to briefly, Paula, say that I belong to the Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development, meaning that together with the colleagues, with Paula, with Anne-Charlotte, the colleagues from DG Energy, and together with the other colleagues, I'm responsible for energy, sustainable energy, and climate change. So together with the colleagues that are dealing with the global picture, with the EU agenda on energy, climate change, we have to be coherent in our action externally. So I have the ambition to say that we are the external arm of our colleagues internal, let's put it this way. And be reassured that sustainable, clean, renewable energy is at the top of our international cooperation and development cooperation agenda. Not because, and this is, I say it, because we are not per se the energy experts, you know, we are development experts. We belong to the development cooperation world, because energy is important for access, is important for, the climate change, but it's important for sustainable development. Without energy in our developed partner countries, you will not have access to health, you will not have access to education, you have not access to the basic services, and there is no life, decent life for all. So this is our objective and our motivation. And as I said, is at the top of our agenda in the development cooperation. If you look at our main development cooperation, the EU development cooperation policy document, the consensus on development, you will see that energy is there, climate change as well. And we have, quite substantial funds. And this is where I want to go into the start, to go there to the setting of the right policy framework. I want to start from the investment side, because we act on the basis of 3 axes of cooperation. One of them, very important, very relevant, is the investments. We have 3.7 billion allocated for the period 2014 to 2020 to energy cooperation, out of which, of course, 2.7 are allocated to Africa, to sub-Saharan Africa. That's where most of the needs are, together also with seeds, and we spoke a lot about seeds at the ministerial, at the conference before the General Assembly, with clear target on access, or increase access. We want to increase access to energy. We want to increase renewable energy generation. We want to increase energy efficiency, fight and reduce CO2 production, and we need investment for that. And one of our major and latest, investment instrument is the external investment plan. That is not only about energy, but energy is one of the most important components, for which we had, it's basically. It's about de-risking investment for the private sector. It's to help private sector, to help the agenda, the renewable energy agenda. The other sectors are agriculture, other sectors are you know, work a lot with the private sector is to help, you know, to develop, in the case of energy, the renewable energy agenda. And, you know, so far the investment, the European investment plan altogether, as I said, you know, not only for energy, is expected to mobilize about 44 billion investment. And so far we have mobilized 1.4 billion to support some guarantee schemes, 28. Guarantee tools. And out of these 28, 8 of these tools are for energy. And this is very important. We have other important financing instrument for energy. There is an instrument to de-risk investment for small and medium enterprise especially in rural areas, especially in off-grid areas, that is called electrification financing initiatives. We have 120 million for that, where we are working with the private sector and with financing institutions. So I said we don't provide grants, we provide loans, equity, semi-equity, mezzanine, in order to boost investment in the private sector. Okay, but the private sector, unless we work where the low-hanging fruits are, will not invest if there is not the right policy framework, if there is not the right conducive investment environment to work on it. So the other two axes where we work on our development cooperation is exactly this. We have the political ownership. We want to support the political ownership of the energy agenda, not by accident and not by chance that we have supported the so-called joint declaration with 23 partner countries to reinforce investment cooperation and create the conducive environment. And we are ready to support, you know, all the initiatives continental. For instance, in Africa, we are working together with the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative. That is a global initiative, continental level, that's African-led, that work on the agenda of renewable energy, increase of the renewable agenda generation. We work at national level with the dialogue, with the focal, with our partner countries. We also work at local level, because I think municipality and local authorities have an important role to play. Again, in Africa, we have the Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa, when we help the municipality to prepare their sustainable energy and climate action plans. And we are now also want to link this and support the municipality to work more on, to have access to finance. So this is something that is very important to us, and in many cases I think we need to support also the capacity building, because some of our partner countries are not in a position, or were not in a position, to make the policy reform, to change the regulatory framework on their own. So we have helped them, we are helping them. We have a program that is called Technical Assistance Facility Program that exactly acts like this. We work and help the national authorities to prepare the energy plan. For instance, we have worked with the Pacific Six and we have supported their effort to develop optimal policy for the deployment of renewable energy and energy efficiency in 10 islands. We have supported, you know, for instance, in Ivory Coast, we have supported the unbundling the legislation, the reform on the legislation of the unbundling of the electricity sector. So I think this is exactly what we do. It's a combined action that we want, because we believe that everything has to go together: policy reform, ownership, of course, of our partner countries, and then we can attract investment that can then make the energy agenda even more important. Thank you very much, and stop here.
Thank you, Felice. And now we can open the debate. So I would like to suggest that first we start with you in the room, and then we can go to Slido and see, because there are already many questions loaded there. So who would like to take the floor? We have a micro. We have colleagues that can go around with a microphone. Don't hesitate to raise your hand. And if you could, please introduce yourself so that we know where you come from. Thank you very much. So first here, yeah.
Yes, hello. My name is Eike Weber, and I'm now here as Vice President of the International Solar Energy Society, ISIS. The big white elephant in the room of all the debates we are hearing is the question of who provides the PV panels and modules. We are all talking about deployment, gigawatt scale, everything fine, everything exciting, cost effective, we are all happy. But are we really all happy as a world to be dependent on basically one country delivering the solar PV cells and modules? And at the moment it seems to be, yes, we are all very happy with that and we should stay with it. My point is, right now, and I think it's only for a few more years, we still have a chance. We have technologies developed at my former institute in Freiburg, other places, to be able to make cost-effective production of PV cells and modules, not in competition with Chinese modules, but absolutely cost-effective if we have power purchase agreements at reasonable prices which give investors the chance to put the needed money into production. So my point is, we need to make the decision. Yes, we want to go from presently 400 gigawatt to 10,000 gigawatt in just a few years based on modules from one country, which is at present a friendly country. But I just warn you, you know, there are political consequences, and if a country doesn't behave well, maybe there will be a 50% surcharge. It's just an issue I want to put into the discussion. We are at the moment still able to be technology competitive, but whether this will be the case in 5 years, I don't dare to predict.
Thank you very much. This is related to the topic I've just discussed. This is also related to a new important topic which is emerging. It is the geopolitics of renewable energy, which also Irina has been working on and delivered the report on this, on the work. I would like to collect one or two more questions or comments and then go back to the panel. So who would like to take the floor to introduce a comment? Yes.
If I may, Thomas Novak, European Heat Pump Association. We have been come here together to discuss sectoral integration, and typically that means electricity, heating, cooling, and transport. And by reflex, it's quite often that the connection is done between electricity and transport. So I would like to ask the panel, what is your concrete ideas about connecting electricity and heating and cooling, and specifically for the Gulf Coast countries, as heating is apparently not a real issue. What about the connection between electricity and cooling? How can that be done to balance the electricity grid and allow higher shares of renewables? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. One last question, first round? Yes, please, here in the first round.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am Mr. Grímur Björnsson, a geothermal scientist from Iceland. I have been working here in Abu Dhabi on drilling geothermal wells for a master. I've been working at Aramco data room for Saudi Arabia potential. I have been working all over Europe, south of Berlin, Rhine-Graben, both in Germany and France, also in Hungary, Serbia. So for me, I see for this cooperation here a lot of geothermal potential. So maybe in the discussion here, the presenters can tell us a little about what will happen with geothermal as a part of the integration. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to give the possibility of the panel to respond to these first three issues. Who would like to step in? Frank, would you like to? And then I go to Emmanuel.
Yeah, maybe the second one, because it's a little bit easier, because I mean the cooling is already right now being done by electricity. I think there is a characteristic in the Gulf that specifically in the summertime, cooling is actually sort of like base load. You need 24 hours cooling. And then if you're looking at a situation where, you know, more and more of the electricity, you know, comes from non-dispatchable sources such as solar and wind, how are you going to do that? So again, as I said, you know, you now also have a cost-effective opportunity through you know, the thermal storage in the concentrating solar power plant that you know that is now being built in Dubai, and that can be done elsewhere also. So in that sense, I don't really see there's anything, you know, drastically new that we need to do in terms of, you know, coupling the electricity sector with the cooling sector, because that's already done. It's just a matter of you know, in a smart way, replacing, you know, conventional electricity with the new electricity. But it's not something that we need to reinvent. You mentioned, of course, electric transport. That is something where you do need some thinking, but that's also not something specific for the region. You know, the issues with electric vehicles at a certain point in time. You know, how do you manage the fact that everybody will probably charge at the same time, and how do you manage that in the grid? So you need some smart thinking, but that is certainly not something that is of relatively immediate concern. That is something that, you know, starts to kick in when you have maybe 10% of your cars being electric, etc., which is not something that you know, that is of an immediate concern. And then there is relatively easy fixes for that in terms of, you know, you can have, you know, time of day charging and all kinds of apps and to manage that in the grid.
Thank you. Mr. Turkey Al-Shari, would you like to comment on this
Sure.
specific issue? And also on the solar, if you like to offer.
Yeah, no, I would like to comment on solar. I think with respect to the solar and, you know, China dominating the market and things being cheap, I think when we look at solar, we have lots of expectations. We want cheap energy. We want jobs to be created. And, you know, we don't want to use cheap solar products. So I think there's a trade-off. You can't have everything you're looking for. Now, renewables, I think most nations that are getting into renewables, the focus is job creation. So we all look at what is the best way possible to bring in the manufacturing of solar panels, of other components related to solar. But we need to ensure that it's done on a competitive basis. Now, the panels represent 25 to 30% of the total cost of a solar farm. So in many cases, we are somewhat subsidizing indirectly, whether it's free land, whether it's low financing. But I personally do not agree at all with the concept of import tariffs, with the concept of prohibiting countries to distribute, because you are immediately cutting off the opportunity of competition. So I think to deal with ensuring that you are creating local manufacturing within your country, I strongly believe that you need to incentivize your manufacturing facilities, and not by simply blocking off other technologies from coming in. But it is challenging, it's not easy, but I do think it's doable. And from what we've seen, the private sector has, you know, comes up with amazing solutions. They come up with ideas that you would never expect. And the government should limit its role in terms of being an enabler, as opposed to intruding into business ideas and business decisions. That's with respect to that question. The question you mentioned, sir, was air conditioning. Mm-hmm. Today, actually, in Saudi in specific, you can go to the market and buy a solar coupled air conditioning system. You can have that installed. So the private sector has actually beat us in terms of setting up a framework. We don't have a framework today that allows consumers to get the permitting for such products. So we're trying to catch up with the private sector. The private sector, I think, if you give them the ability to move forward, create the necessary governance and enabling tools, they will you know, take your nation or your country to a whole new level. And I think that was those two questions that I had.
In the European Union, if I may just comment on what you said, in the European Union, one of the things that we included in the revised legislation for renewables is an obligation for the member states to create dynamic conditions for the corporate purchasing of renewables, for which we expect major contribution to attain our targets. It's an area that is growing. You have more and more companies which are adhering to this initiative of becoming 100 renewable energy. So it is also a way to get investment into the sector. It is it's very, very promising. Emmanuel, and then I come to Felice. Emmanuel, we'd like to step in on, from Irena's global point of view, how you see all this interplay. Solar, there was also a question asked about, what about geothermal energy?
Yeah. So, is that not stay? Okay. Regarding the problem of solar PV being manufactured only in one country, just yesterday or 2 days ago, IRENA published a new study on the supply chain of variable renewable energy, and we agree on the fact that in order to benefit of the energy transition, every country should try to be part of the supply chain. This doesn't mean, however, only on the PV panels, because it's not possible for everyone to participate on the production of PV panels, but there are several components of the supply chain for PV systems that can be used for benefiting of the energy transition, for example, aluminium or cement or the electronic components. So yes, we agree on the fact that we should, the countries in particular, oil-dependent countries and countries depending on imports like sub-Saharan Africa, should pursue an industrial policy to have the manufacturing capacity for the energy transition technologies. Then regarding cooling, well, something we sometimes forget about when talking about sector coupling is the time and locational value of energy. Now, cooling has a wonderful quality. We use cooling when we have sun, so it is naturally made, which it is natural that we are going to consume, to cool our houses when outside is sunny, and therefore, among all the sector coupling technology is the best suited for the integration of variable renewable energy and needs small thermal storage capabilities like ice storage or cold water storage. And regarding the question on geothermal, now the direct use of renewable energy can help us to reduce around 7% of our global emissions. However, sector coupling, meaning renewable energy and the integration of electricity in the transport sector and the heating and cooling can assist the reduction by 44%. So it's very important to use direct use of renewable energy, but sector coupling can pursue much larger decarbonization.
Thank you very much. Felice, you wanted to step in, and if you like, I mean, you see the last
question. I have a question.
Yes, so if you can also address the last question.
I also want to pick up on the easy question, that I don't know if it's so easy, because I mentioned before our experience with the Covenant of Mayors, of course, Sub-Saharan Africa. So still, I think the access in this part of the world, it's predominant, it's very relevant, because if I look at the Covenant of Mayors in Europe and other regions, there is energy efficiency, there are others, priorities that come up into when you talk at the municipality level. But despite, in such initiatives, access is still important. When we address and we discuss with our partners, we talk about, as I said before, a sustainable energy and climate action plans, including, energy efficiency, including transportation. This is quite relevant. So I think we try to see the demand and to balance the needs of the country. So bearing in mind that's now a country level, and this is may sound a little bit theoretical, but I think it's very relevant because we are all part of the Paris Agreement. We have to work in the context of the NDC implementation, and every country, some better than others, have a NDC implementation action plan that determine if they want to work on mitigation and we work on adaptation, and in that sense. The question, the shift in the global geopolitical power balances and policy how does it affect the success of development cooperation in the sector. But definitely determine the development cooperation direction in the sector. And this is when I said, the first thing that we have to do is to look at the political ownership, and we have to look at the global picture, at the country picture, at the regional picture. And if you look again in the sector where in the region where we work most, in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's a changing world continuously. So we have to adapt through policy dialogue, through looking at the needs, to looking at the priorities. When every time we discuss on energy with our partner countries, we talk also about the energy mix, because we want to go renewable, but of course we don't have to forget that it's a transition, so it will take time. So I think it's very relevant. I wouldn't call it affect, but influence, and it's part of the discussion in the energy sector, but I would say in any sector of development cooperation.
Thank you very much, Felice. I would like to give another opportunity for 1 or 2 questions from the audience, if there is. Otherwise, we go to the Slido, if you prefer. So, okay, let's go to the Slido. And I see that there are several. There is, who is asking for the floor? Ah, sorry, I can't see you. Yeah, please.
Hi, Steve Sawyer, Global Wind Energy Council. I just wanted to ask Frank about the giant hydrogen pipeline, and how the conventional wisdom is that because the molecule is so small, it's very difficult and very expensive to transport hydrogen by pipeline. But you've obviously solved that problem, and I'd just like to hear more.
Yes, there's actually been quite some work done on looking at the conversion of natural gas pipelines to accommodate hydrogen. And indeed, there is concerns that certain steel sorts get brittle, and that it escapes through all kinds of seals and flanges and pumps. And there was a study done by Kiwa in the Netherlands in August. It was released. It's unfortunately only in Dutch, but they did a pretty in-depth study at the Dutch, the high pressure system, as well as the entire distribution system. And surprisingly, against conventional wisdom, it seems that you don't need to do almost anything to change to 100% hydrogen, which is good news for the gas distribution companies, because they now are actively looking, for the future of their assets, which otherwise they would have to decommission and spend money on. And that's not just onshore, but it's also offshore. So there is an interesting dynamic now into looking how you can turn offshore wind energy into hydrogen offshore, and then use existing natural gas pipelines that you already have, and then connect it to the gas system. So there is a big drive specifically from the gas distribution companies in looking at this as something for the future. But technically it doesn't seem to be a huge problem. There's different pumps, there's different compressors. In the distribution system there might be some modifications necessary, but specifically the large transmission system, hardly anything.
Thank you very much, Frank. Could I ask Dr. Turki Al-Sheikh, if you could look at the 2 questions that specifically related to Saudi Arabia and its intention in the future. So is Saudi Arabia exploring, sorry, you have that one as well, the first one.
Okay. The first was a success rate of our first project, SCACA, and the second is blockchain.
Blockchain, if you intend to support the application of blockchain. And the last question is relating to the export of renewable electricity and green hydrogen in the future.
Are they referring to electronic currency here? Is that what we're talking about with blockchain?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first item, and I think, and we continue to say this, is we believe the biggest success story of SCACA project, which was our first PV project, was the fact that we pre-developed and de-risked everything in the project. We did all the hydro studies, the geo studies, the environmental permitting of 16+ organizations. We spent 2 years working on that site prior to tendering it. So we basically allowed any developer, whether new or existing, to come in and simply apply his expertise. He didn't have to understand the country, understand network. It was simply come, give us your best solution, everything is ready. So we believe that that was the biggest reason why we achieved great prices and a high number of interested bidders. Blockchain, we are looking at blockchain. We've discussed this with several entities. However, at this stage, we still feel that there's a lot more that needs to be matured within blockchain applications, but we're not eliminating it from our consideration in the possible future.
Okay.
Is there another question? Okay.
All from you. Thank you very much. I think we'll have to move forward. Please join me in thanking our panelists for being with us today and for the insights they've offered. Thank you very much to all of you. I know that several are in the next room just for bilateral exchanges, but we really have to restart, otherwise we'll not be able to fulfill all the program before 6, as it is our aim. So, ladies and gentlemen, Excellency, so here we are, based on the discussions that we just had on our policy session. Becomes clear that there are significant opportunities, but also significant challenges in driving sectoral integration on the ground. From our perspective, the European perspective, it is clear that sectoral integration is a must if we want to achieve the Paris agreements and a climate-neutral economy. And this is exemplified by our commitment and the commitment of a number of member states to move towards 100% renewable energy, as well as by European companies, as I just had the opportunity to say before, and local communities that are already putting solutions in place to completely transfer the energy system. And in this context, so after this first discussion, it's my pleasure, great pleasure, to introduce 3 speakers who we have invited to provide you with some inspiring examples of how policy and practitioners are already supporting sectoral integration. So, and the first speaker, keynote speaker, who I'd like to have the great pleasure to invite to the podium is Anne-Charlotte Bourneville. Anne-Charlotte is Head of Unit in charge of International Relations and Enlargement in the Director General for Energy of the European Commission. Anne-Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paola. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today at this EU Energy Day that has become a highlight of the EU presence at the World Future Energy Summit. And it is a key opportunity for us to discuss the latest developments in energy policies, technologies, and projects. And it is also a pleasure for me because it's my first trip to the region, so my first time in Abu Dhabi, and then tomorrow I'll be flying to Oman for our EU GCC Energy Expert Group. And it's extremely interesting for me to witness also the energy transformation that is happening here in the region. So the topic of our session is leadership in achieving an integrated clean energy transition, and the purpose, as Paola said, is about sharing inspiring examples of countries, regions, companies that have committed themselves towards sectoral integration and a fully integrated clean energy transition. So speaking of leadership, I will, of course, emphasize the role of the EU and briefly recall what we have achieved and where we are heading. But the Energy Union is not an inward project, and to make the energy transition happening, to make it a success, we need to work together, to cooperate with our key international partners, and this will be the second part of my intervention today. So, I will start then with the EU, and let me start by giving a few concrete examples that just to mention that in March 2018, Portugal generated more renewable electricity than it consumed. Last year, also a Danish company inaugurated in the Irish Sea the largest offshore wind farm in the world. And soon, the island of Tilos in Greece will be the first Mediterranean island to become fully autonomous based on renewables only. And renewables are also breaking the separation between the oil and gas companies and the utilities. Large European oil and gas companies such as Ørsted, which was previously Dong, have changed their names to reflect this new reality and are investing massively in the renewable sector. And the same goes for companies such as Shell or Total, which also invest massively in renewables, in energy storage, batteries, and energy distribution. So the EU has been an early mover on the energy transition. 10 years ago, in 2009, we kick-started the clean energy transition by introducing ambitious renewable energy policies at a time when most people thought that renewables were a niche market. We set ambitious targets as part of our 2020 energy and climate strategy, aiming at a 20% contribution of renewable in our energy mix, an increase of 20% in energy efficiency, and a reduction of 20% in EU greenhouse gas emissions. So it was the 2020 energy climate framework. And after a decade, we can say that we are on track to achieve our 2020 energy targets. Renewables represent today 17% of final energy consumption in Europe and are now a mainstream technology. And this is to be compared with the share of renewables in total energy demand at global level, which is 10.4%. So it is much more in the EU. The cost of renewables declined considerably in the past decade. Solar photovoltaic costs dropped by 70% since 2010. And also grid parity for wind power, that is to say the moment when these technologies can compete without subsidies is imminent and is already opening in some countries like Germany. In terms of job in the EU, the number of renewable energy jobs reached 1.4 million in 2017, and it is expected to increase with the creation of up to 1.5 million new jobs by 2050. And our big success has been that we managed to decouple economic growth from CO2 emissions, with total emissions decreasing by 23% between 1990 and 2017, while the EU economy grew by 77.5% over the same period. So we are also nearing our target of improving energy efficiency by 20% by 2020. So this is why it was time to raise even further our level of ambition to look at the 2030 perspective, and this is what we did by putting on the table in November 2016 the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. So with this comprehensive legislative package, we have put on the table the most advanced regulatory framework to modernize our energy system, make it fit for the energy transition, support clean energies, innovation, high-quality employment, as well as a strong industrial basis in Europe, while putting consumers at the heart of the energy transition. So the package is now fully agreed, so it includes new legislation in renewables, energy efficiency, electricity market design, and also governance. And it includes also new ambitious targets for 2030, just to briefly recall. So it's an EU-level target for energy efficiency of at least 32.5%, an EU-level binding target of at least 32% of renewable energy sources in final energy consumption. And both targets include the possibility of a further upward revision in 2023. And this means that by 2030, Europe will reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by more than 40% compared to the level of 1990. Of course, to achieve our ambitious objectives of decarbonization, a significant transformation of the energy system will be required. We estimate that at EU level, 379 billion euros of investment will be needed annually for the period 2020-2030 to achieve these targets. But this transformation will benefit our economy. It should lead to an increase of GDP by approximately 1%, and it should create almost 1 million new jobs. The largest share of emission reduction will be achieved through electrification, also through more penetration of renewables in heating and cooling and in the transport sector, and also through energy efficiency. For example, in 2030, more than 50%, it was said in the previous session, of the electricity consumed in the EU will come from renewable sources, and today it is already more than 30%. So the EU is a front runner in the energy transition, but it is certainly not alone. The clean energy transition is happening globally, steered by the Paris Agreement, and also under the pressure, unfortunately, of the multiplication of extreme weather events. So energy transition has become a clear priority globally, both for governments as well as for investors. Just to give, again, a few figures, in 2016, 1.5 trillion euros were invested in energy, with more than 40% invested in clean energy, such as renewable, energy efficiency, smart grids, and storage. Today, we have 179 countries that have set renewables targets, and we have 57 countries which have plans to fully decarbonize their electricity sector. So renewable energy, as I said already, is also created new jobs. IRENA indicates that at global level, more than 10 million people now work in the renewable energy sector. And according to the International Energy Agency, the transition to a renewable energy will create 19 million new jobs at global level by 2050. And this will more than offset jobs losses in the fossil fuel industry. So all these figures show that the clean energy transition is a clear economic opportunity with tangible benefits, not only for the EU, but also at global scale. So this brings me to the second part of my intervention, which is about how the EU cooperates with its key international partners to drive forward the energy transition. So, as I said, thanks to the drop in the cost of solar and wind energy, all countries have now the potential to economically develop their own sources of energy, and many countries and regions have firmly engaged on the energy transition path. As we are in the Gulf region, let me start with an example from the region. So in Dubai, the Masdar consortium signed for a PV project to be constructed this year with a record low price for electricity of 2.99 cents per kilowatt. And we just heard in the previous session of a new record low of 2 cents for wind power. In the Gulf region, clearly, there are huge opportunities for renewables. As someone from this region said to me, we have oil beneath your feet and the sun, the new oil above your head. So to foster our cooperation with the Gulf region, we set up an EU GCC energy expert group focusing on cooperation in clean energy technology and policies. So this Wednesday, I will participate with colleagues from the GCC at the regular meeting of this group, which will take place in Oman. And beside the energy expert group, which provide the political steer for our dialogue, we also have our EU GCC Clean Energy and Technology Network, which Frank briefly presented to you in the previous session, which organizes joint initiatives such as workshops, conferences, and study tours. So now moving to the Gulf, to the Mediterranean region, So let me highlight a few concrete examples. So in Morocco, for example, the EU supports the country's energy policy and finances a number of major projects in the field of energy for an amount of 237 million euros. The EU has co-funded, in particular, the first 3 phases of the Ouarzazate thermal solar energy project Noor 1, 2, and 3, with an installed capacity of respectively 160, 200, and 150 megawatts. And we will also co-finance the forthcoming solar project in Midelt for the construction of 2 hybrid PV and CSP power plants of some 500 megawatts each. Let me also mention Egypt. Egypt targets to generate 20% of its electricity from renewables by 2022 and 42% by 2025. Egypt is clearly entering the world of solar energy after it inaugurated the largest solar power plant early this year. It is the Benban Solar Complex, which was built in the city of Aswan in southern Egypt. It has 200,000 solar panels, and which allow the panels to move and face the sun throughout the day. And it generates up to 1.8 gigawatts of power, which is enough to service 20,000 households. So we are closely cooperating with Egypt. We have signed last April a memorandum of understanding on energy cooperation with Egypt, and we are in the process of setting up also some expert groups to support the Egyptian government in going further into the reform of its energy sector. I should also, of course, mention China, where our cooperation focuses on clean energy, in particular renewables. One example is the very successful China National Renewable Energy Center that is jointly run by the EU member states and China, and which has been a strong contributing factor in China's recent extension of renewable energy. So, and here the figures are very impressive for China. In 2017, China had a renewable energy capacity of 1,746 gigawatts, which represents over 80% of the globally installed renewable capacity. And we estimate that this Chinese renewable generation capacity will further quadruple by 2050. Underlining the need and importance of a close EU-China cooperation on clean energy. But of course, this cooperation should be win-win, with China playing by the rules of the WTO and opening its markets. Another successful example is coming from India, where wholesale solar and wind power prices have also reached record low values in the past 2 years. This was much faster than analysts predicted, and it puts clean energy as a credible and economic alternative to fossil fuel-generated power in the country. So India is making now the right move to reach the ambitious target of 175 gigawatts of renewable energy generation it set itself to implement the Paris Agreement. And recently, I think at the Arena General Assembly, a new additional 350 gigawatts has just been announced by India. So we have an EU-India Clean Energy and Climate Partnership through which we are supporting India in developing its offshore wind market. And we hope it will be as successful as onshore wind and solar. Let me also mention Africa, which is an important priority also for us, for the EU today. In Africa, political leaders want to accelerate and scale up the continent's enormous renewable energy potential. So to this end, and that was, I think, mentioned by my colleague Felice Zaccheo in the previous session, we have set up the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, which we support with significant funding. And we also launched recently in Johannesburg, early November, an EU-Africa platform for sustainable energy investments, which will gather policymakers, industry, financial institutions, and academia to work together on the regulatory framework and how to foster business-to-business contacts with a view to attracting more investments in the clean energy sector in Africa. I'd like also to finish by mentioning our multilateral cooperation. So we have the G20, which accounts for more than 80% of global primary energy consumption. So the G20 can and should lead the global clean energy transition. And we are very pleased that the G20 has a strong focus on clean energy transition in its efforts, and we look forward to continuing the valuable work with other G20 economies in the coming years. Last year, the European Commission co-hosted the 9th Clean Energy Ministerial Meeting with the Nordic countries, and we are also actively working with Canada on the next Clean Energy Ministerial Meeting, which will take place this year in Canada. And also coming back to India, at the last COP in Katowice, we signed, the EU signed with the International Solar Alliance, signed a joint declaration for cooperation on solar energy. So ladies and gentlemen, so let me conclude my intervention by underlying that leadership is about achievements, and we have achieved a lot in the EU. It's also about sharing our experience in the energy transition and sharing lessons learned, the successes but also the mistakes that we've been doing in the EU, and it's exactly what we are looking to do in our dialogues with third countries. So at international level, renewable energy can create stability, they can help increasing security of supply, they can contribute to creating more growth and jobs, they can also help to stabilize local populations, so this is all very positive. Of course, it involves opportunities but also challenges. For challenges, I would refer to you to the last IRENA report on the geopolitics of the energy transformation, which was released on Friday, and which is a very interesting read. So it's only through international cooperation and dialogue that we will manage to move up a gear and manage the transformation to a more sustainable energy system and economy. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne-Charlotte, and shall we proceed? And now I'd like to give the floor to Eric Scotto from Aqua Energy to tell us about his experiences, and in particular his innovative projects and products that are making a big change in this energy transition. Eric.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Eric Scotto, so I'm representing a company called Aqua Energy. So just some promotion. So simply what we are doing is we are developing, we are building, we are financing before to build, of course, and we are operating renewable energy plants across the world. We started in 2003, so that means since 15 years, our only aim is to promote renewable energy across the world. And even if today 36% of the global consumption last year came from renewable energy, our aim is still to push for 100%. And over the years, we've been focusing on finding new technology. So we are involved in wind, in solar, in biomass, in hydro, so anything but renewable to produce energy. And in the last past years, since we've been competing and in different countries on tenders, because renewable energy is affordable today and is the most cost-effective way to produce energy in most of the countries, In some cases, sometimes it's difficult to win tenders because when we started, we were a tiny company. We're still a tiny company compared to our competitors. But since then, all the big guys, now they are pushing for renewable energy. And as a medium-sized company, it's very difficult to compete with utility and former oil producer, which are switching to renewable. So in the last past years, we imagined and we found out that the only way for us to survive in the future will be to find new ideas. And one of the best ideas we found some years ago was to do sector coupling. So that's just an example here. And I decided today to focus on two examples of what we're doing on sector coupling. I'm going to be focusing first on one of the paths we found, which is the housing, how to couple renewable energy production and housing. And the second one will be how to couple renewable energy and mobility. So let me give you two examples. This story is not a new story. It's a story we started 9 years ago, but everything takes time. We imagined 9 years ago that if we want that, as the American Building Integrated Agency said, that 15% of the production of renewable energy, will come from the roof by 2050. 9 years ago, we agree with that idea, but we thought that it will happen only when solar panel will be different. It will happen when architects will love to install solar panel on the roof, a new building. So we push for building integrated solution, BIPV. And unfortunately, in France, where we started, the framework disappeared in a day. And we stopped the product. We installed this product 9 years ago in south of France, and everybody found this product great because it's not a solar panel, it's not a tile, it's a solar tile. So for the housing business, it's really replacing the roof. I should say it was, because it was 9 years ago. And in the same time, it's producing energy as a normal panel. The cells are the same. It's a dual glass product with normal cells inside. Everything stopped, and 3 years ago we thought that it would be a good time to restart this idea, which was finally a good idea. So we restarted the idea 3 years ago, and thanks to the technology, we decided to change the color. And we started to talk to architects, and we told them if we were presenting roof, which are 100% producing renewable energy, but which are looking like the roof you usually are using in some different regions of the world. Will it work? And especially, would it work if the kilowatt hour we are producing are competitive, and if this tile, when you take the price of a normal tile plus a solar panel combined, if this tile is competitive with that double solution, will it work? And the answer was yes, and there was a good timing, and all the architects were waiting for such product. So I give you some example. So that's things we built some years ago, before the color. So that's just an example. I should not show that here, but that's just to show you that sensible building could accept such innovation. But the most interesting are those ones. That's a building in the middle of the Champs-Élysées, and the other one is an example of what we're going to build on a castle in France. So if you can make it on castle in France, I'm sure it will happen in many countries. So thanks to the color, we can imagine a roof of south of Italy, which is red. We can imagine whatever we want. We even done a gold panel that we presented for the Dubai airport, but that was 3 years ago. That was a little bit early. But I'm sure today, if we will come back with that idea, that will work. And I can tell you, we just won the roof for the new pavilion for the French pavilion for Dubai Expo 2020 will be installed with different colors of this product. And right now, we are building also an incredible building in California. We responded to a tender. The final tender was Aqua Energy and Tesla, and we won. So we won against Tesla in California for a huge building. I'm not allowed to tell you the name, but in 3 months' time, you will realize what we are doing. And the great news is that the architect is called Big. It's a Danish architect. And thanks to the Danish architect Big, all the planets, and thanks to the customers, will see all the roof of the world completely differently. So that's an example of sector coupling, because it helps the housing, and it helps, of course, to deploy renewable energy. And that's a great situation to use all the roofs of Europe. I think we can do a lot all over the world just using the roofs. That's first example. Second one, we, with the European Commission, you understood by the previous pitch that speech, not pitch, there's nothing to sell. You understood that hydrogen and transportation and mobility was a key thing for renewable energy. Of course, when we have extra production, and thanks to the cost, which is cheaper and cheaper of renewable energy, we have an excellent and a great opportunity to change the way we are transporting goods on this planet, and the way we will be penetrating the cities on this planet, thanks to a clean green vehicle. And the hydrogen is one great application. So we apply to Europe, and we receive a grant, because we still need to, it's a prototype, we still need to demonstrate that idea. The idea, earlier you've been talking about producing hydrogen here, transporting hydrogen to Europe, because the cost of energy here is cheap. And in the cost of a kilo of hydrogen, 40% comes from the price of energy to do the electrolysis. So it's a good idea. We think there is an alternative to that. We think that we can also do distributed hydrogen, distributed electrolysis all over the world. And we can be fully independent in some countries, in some regions, in territories, to produce our own mobility. I don't think we will be dependent in most of the countries in the world to anybody else to ensure our own mobility. And that will work in all the territories. So we received that grant just to do the demonstration, and I'm pleased to announce you that in the next few months we will have 400 light trucks and heavy trucks in 4 cities of France that will be using hydrogen. So we're going to be installing 33 hydrogen stations in 4 cities, thanks to the grants of European Commission, and we will demonstrate that it will work in the future. So that's another example of sector coupling. So we're starting with Paris, Marseille, Lyon, and Bordeaux, and we choose to have some partners, and the partners are a group called Galeries Lafayette. So if you've been to Paris, it's a department store. And the idea for them was to transport all their goods from outside Paris to Paris, thanks to those trucks. We have another group which is called JC Deco. They are a billboard advertising group. Why we took them? It's because we think that we will be installing many small hydrogen stations all over the cities in the world. And JC Deco is working with us on that idea. So that's another way to think about sector coupling. So I just wanted to show you 2 examples of what we are doing, but I'm sure in the future, thanks to EU and the support of innovative solutions like that, we'll go further all together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric, for these 2 inspiring examples. Would you like to join Anne-Charlotte? Yeah, because then afterwards we may have space for a few questions still. And just to complete the panel, would like now to give the floor to Arash Azami, from CEO of Kamanjir. Please come forward. You have slides?
I have slides.
Okay, so then you have the machine here.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here and to well, to be able to speak to you during a little part of this fantastic European Energy Day again. It's the second European Energy Day that I'm allowed to experience here at ADNEC, and I must say that you know, there's an amazing amount of progress also being made here. The first thing that I'd like to show you is this little image that was given to me in 2007 by Lawrence Stout, who was then the director of the Irish Energy Institute. And then the question is, what are we looking at here? Well, if I give you the hint that this is a timeline, then you may come up with the idea that, yes, this shows fossil fuel consumption by humans over time. And it also shows that what we call conventional energy today is actually alternative, because we're only using it for a very short amount of time in our existence. And the actual conventional energy is renewables-based. It's solar-based and plant-based and you know, biomass, and because that's what we as humans have always used and will always use. This also means, given the fact that we are around this tipping point of decreasing fossil fuel consumption and replacing them by renewables again, that we have a long way to go. Now, the huge gain that we've made in this transition towards fossil fuels is a gain of time. Because prior to the energy revolution, we were used to spending up to 50% of our waking hours to fulfill our basic needs. For instance, trying to collect wood so that we can cook. And now we have reduced that to the flick of a switch. And that is what has enabled us to progress at such pace as mankind. And what I believe in is that now we have developed technologies to actually hold on to that flick of a switch time investments to fulfill our energy needs, but still get those from 100% renewables, which is also opening the pathway to including everybody in the world to enjoy the benefits of renewable energy, rather than having a part of the world enjoying the benefits of the energy that we're using today. Given this timeline, and given the fact that it has taken the planet around 500 million years to build up the resources that we are using today, if we want to be in balance with the pace at which the Earth is producing fossil fuels right now by converting plants and animals into oil and coal and gas, then we need to cut back on fossil fuel consumption. And if we're looking at the numbers, it should be this. So we have to save around 99.9999% because we are using 1 million times faster than the Earth can cope with. So this is the transition challenge that we are looking at. And in the meantime, it also says that a society that eventually will rely upon 100% renewables is not so much a choice. It is inevitable. We will go there anyways. And this also means that this is an invitation to adopt new thinking, new models that will make the old model obsolete. It's not about incremental changes to the system that we know today. It is about new thinking, it's about new models, it's about new frameworks, and it's about creating this new reality. And I also believe that we are embracing 4 new energy paradigms during these few decades that we are working in. And one is that we are moving away from volume-based business models and adopting more and more value-based business models. It's no longer about the amount of things or units of energy that we're selling, it's about the amount of value that we can create by distributing them. The second is we're moving away from assets and towards access. It's no longer about the ownership of energy assets, for instance, but it's about having the access to the means that will provide our wealth, for instance. The third one is the movement from scarcity to abundance, because right now we are using scarce energy resources and we are moving towards abundant energy resources. Just to give an example, the sun is shining 1,437 times the amount of energy that the entire humanity is consuming on the surface of the Earth. So if we would harvest 0.6 promille, or 0.06% of all the solar energy that is hitting the Earth's surface, then already humanity's needs would be fulfilled. And the fourth is that we're moving away from companies and towards commons. Because in a way, we need to commonize also our energy distribution systems, because they should be of everybody and for everybody. It should be all-inclusive. It should be including every human on the face of the planet. And I also believe that these four megatrends are driven by digitalization, all four of them in their own right. Now, the work that I am doing is towards an Internet of Energy. And I presume that most of us have sometimes been on the Internet. I have, and it was invented in 1989, of course. The birth of the web was basically when Tim Berners-Lee wrote the www protocol. And it was that protocol that is, by the way, ownerless and still held by a consortium, aided by these protocols and standards that on a global scale we can disperse information, share knowledge. We don't have to look at, we don't have to take into account what kind of device the other person has, where that person is located. We can just send them a message with an image and it will look the same at the other end of the line. And I believe that we should work on the same thing with energy. We should work on this system where energy can come from any resource, can exist in every form that we can imagine, molecules, electrons, could be heat, could be anything, could be hydrogen, and then can be exchanged between machines on a global scale. This is also the movement that went from centralized distribution systems to distributed systems, where everybody is actually contributing to the system. There are no more consumers of data, because everybody who is in this room who's holding a smartphone is actually producing data at the same time, and whether we know it or not, we're all data prosumers rather than consumers. And with energy, we're doing the same thing. We're moving away from the centralized systems, such as this example in Germany, towards decentralized systems, which looks like this. This is the rooftop of Rotterdam Central Station, where my office is located. And we're moving towards distributed systems, where you can actually no longer tell whether a user is producing or consuming, because both can do at the same time. And it's also less and less of an issue whether this user is getting that energy from the sun, or from geothermal heat, or from some hydrogen resource, or is actually sending back some residual heat from their industrial processes. It could be anything. And here you see that actually these four megatrends are actually being represented. If we're looking at digitalization, the global number of connected Internet of Things devices already is 8.4 billion. And it will triple in the next 6 years. This is on top of the 10 billion computers, for instance, and already internet-connected devices that we know in the world. So if we could interconnect not only on a data scale, but on an energetic scale, and these IoT devices can be anything from hydrocrackers to cars to ovens to pools to, you name it, to phones, then we can have the establishment of this Internet of Energy. And what I believe in is that one day, and it will be within a generation, that every connected machine will be able to exchange not only data with one another, but energy with one another, from a multitude of resources, automatically, in every suitable form. Now, what are we doing today? We are designing today for an automated, digitized, actually smart multi-commodity grid in the province of South Holland, which is the most industrialized region of the Netherlands, with the port of Rotterdam, for instance. And this is including and integrating heat and electrons and molecules. So we can actually inter-exchange within the next few years heat, hydrogen, electricity from solar farms, etc. The second thing that we are doing is we're developing an energy digital twin, so that we can have a full track and trace of every unit of energy on a multi-commodity grid. It actually means, and we've had the first proof of concept April last year, that we can embed information about a unit of electricity within that electricity, which means that out of your AC outlet, you not only get the electricity, but also you get the information that tells you where is it from, what route has it taken, how much of it has been lost underway. And using that, actually, we can deploy artificial intelligence to optimize the routing over multiple carriers, which means effectively that there's a couple of % of energy that is being lost right now that we no longer need to lose because we are optimizing the routing of energy. One of the examples actually has been mentioned already. What is the case for producing hydrogen on offshore wind farms and transporting that onshore through a rather cheap, 15 times cheaper than electricity grid, and then have the eventual conversion to electricity on the last mile, for instance, rather than at the point of the source. Another one is we're developing business opportunities and the initial consortium. We're doing this together with the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate of the Netherlands. We're defining Internet of Energy models for self-balancing artificial intelligent grids together with one of the leading DSOs in the Netherlands, distribution service operators, Enexis. And we have the initial developments of energy transfer protocols, and we're preparing for the first physical test casing in conjunction with the Technical University of Delft. So this is where we are today, and there's one little mention, and that is that every critical intellectual property is actually being held by a foundation which is owned by nobody. So we want to ensure that this is not going to be the next Uber or Airbnb, where eventually the commercial model is being centralized and the benefit is actually for a few, but this really has to be a communal thing. So we are actually designing the organization in that way also. It is of everybody and for everybody. And in the end, we're also leading the machine-to-machine track at the upcoming largest blockchain hackathon of the world, which is called Odyssey, and is also held in the Netherlands. So that means that we're going to have around 110, 120 developers actually working on partial solutions for the Internet of Energy. So my personal dream is universal access to renewable energy as a fulfilled human right. And I would like to invite you also to dream and develop these dreams into actions together with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our three speakers. We have heard incredible things about connecting Internet of Things in energy, creating, as we just heard from Arash, new models that make old models obsolete, like the solar tiles. And this makes the leadership that Anne-Charlotte was speaking to us about. We are, of course, already late in our agenda, but it does not mean that we cannot have questions from you or comments from you. So please, if any of you would like to raise a question to the panel or to make a comment, please do so. Raise your hands and tell us who you are, and we go from there. Please. There is a micro? Yeah. No, here, sorry. Was here first. Yeah, sorry, then we come there.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Murad. I'm an independent researcher. This is my second Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week visit. And I think what you guys are doing in Universal Right is very amazing, because finding a common framework where people would find the type of protocol that is necessary to build or pave the future trend into something as essential for our survival on Earth, and being responsible to that is very inspiring. So do you think it is possible to share this knowledge with the bigger organizations and pave this new pathway on a much more, let's say, academically format, such as with MIT and Harvard and so forth? And if so, have you guys done that already?
Thank you. We will move to the second question there. And if there's a third one, I would also take it. Yes, then on the back, the lady.
Okay. I'm Rainer Heinrich Ralbers from the European Renewable Energies Federation and also from the German Federation. I would have a question which concerns Arash and Anne-Charlotte. We are talking about good examples and how to facilitate, accelerate integrated energy transition. You, of course, gave us, Arash, you showed the long-term vision, new paradigm, and then we heard from the EU, we have this 2020 target, you did not even mention we have the 2030 target, we will probably reach it, we have a framework in place. So how do we bridge the gap from necessary visions to frameworks, targets, policy decisions? And I should not forget to mention that targets are not automatically fulfilled, you really need action. So, but hopefully going in that direction, and at the end of the day, should be 100% renewable energy, certainly.
Yes. The lady there, and then we can come back to you. Okay. In front.
Good afternoon. I'm a student of business. My question is, we have seen two very different visions of energy future. On one hand, we were looking at these really mega projects on renewable energy in China, India, in Africa. On the other hand, we also looked at these intelligent microgrids. These are two very different visions of the energy future, while not mutually exclusive. And the forces behind the finance, the operation of these are quite different. So I'd like to have an idea of where do you see the market going, both from like business-driven forces as well as regulations.
Just and the fourth question here in front, please. And then we go back to the panel.
Yeah, Grima Björnsson, a geothermal guy. For the last presenter, can you tell us a little about, for the integration energy system, what kind of infrastructure will you need in a modern city to move the molecules, the electrons, and the heat?
Okay. Sorry, one last.
Locally here in the UAE and the Saudi Arabia, we are producing water from the sea by desalination, like desalination plants. There is no tendency to move from decoupling power and electricity and to have standalone RO and productions. What is the future solar standalone solar and water productions, you call it application or what? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now proceed quickly giving the floor to you, dear panelists, who would like to kickstart. Shamin, yes?
Well, yeah, if we do it chronologically, then I'll start with answering your question. And thank you so much for your comments. It is really empowering because, you know, I started this on my own and feeling alone, and now actually we're seeing this global community starting to support some of the ideas, because we are also driven also by the inspired by the possibilities, for instance, that the upcoming blockchain and distributed ledger technologies are providing us for autonomous energy exchange systems, for instance. As far as collaborations are concerned with large organizations, it is slowly getting there. I mean, we have the Technical University of Delft who are supporting us now, and the government of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which is fantastic. We are, however, and this is also a partial answer, I would say, to I think it is your question, really looking into, you know, that we're not taking a standpoint in whether the movement should be bottom-up or top-down. As a matter of fact, our agency is right now performing a study for the province of South Holland, which is going to be released in May, where we are developing two scenarios for the energy future, and both of them by 2050 are 100% carbon free. But the one is really from the perspective of a government and basically a few voices that are really defining what the pathway should be. And the other one is, we call that the patchwork scenario, is really designed from the initial idea that everybody is free to make their own decisions as far as their own energy consumption is concerned and their own energy generation is concerned, and that everybody should be free to do so. And it's a bit of a presumption because we're in the middle of the study, but we are probably going to come to the conclusion that we do need some design principles to be defined on a large scale, but that we need also to always empower the individual users, and those may be businesses or individuals, to make their own decisions as to which kind of grid would you want to be connected, for instance, and how smart is it to use a source of energy that has to come from very far, if there's another source of energy right around the corner that you may use also to fulfill the same needs. If we're looking at, for instance, the Icelandic situation, then a lot of the energy will come from geothermal sources, for instance. And it would be kind of pointless to have that energy be produced 6,000 kilometers away, because the energy is already there. So we really have to look into that, and that requires research, and we are seeking collaborations with academic institutes to actually make that go faster. One of the parties that we have been involved with is the Stanford Peace Innovation Lab, because a lot of this also has to do with conflict prevention. You know, if there's no shortage at any given point and at any given moment of energy, then this is actually a driver for peace on a global scale. So that is one of the parties that we are involved with. In my past, I have been involved with MIT, but by now, mainly it is individuals and some European knowledge institutions.
Arash, if I may, before passing the floor to Eric and Charlotte, if you look at the last question, is directed at you. What could be, how could it look like the multi-energy commodity grid here in the region, based on your knowledge of the region?
Well, that
Any
is.
hints on that?
So I have no in-depth knowledge of the geo information data of this region. But one thing that we can know for sure is that solar is very powerful here, and that could be solar. Photovoltaic electricity, but I would definitely also look into thermal energy coming from the sun. And another opportunity that I would look into is electrolysis from sun power. Then, of course, there will be sites where wind energy is more viable, but it's always a stacking. You know, it's never one resource. And it's always the interaction between multiple resources and multiple forms of energy, because then the energy, the system itself will be self-balancing because you're using these multiple layers.
Yeah, Eric, a few questions were also directed to you, and then you have two in the Slido as well.
This works?
No, it's on, it's on. Yeah,
of course. Okay. I'd like to add one thing at what you said to answer what the multi-energy commodity grid look like in the region. One interesting thing, we've been talking about sector coupling, and I show you housing and solar, on mobility. We can do triple coupling. For example, housing, data center, and solar, for example, or any renewable energy. Soon you'll see, and it will be. We can apply that to the region. Instead of doing a normal data center, you will avoid to locate all the server at the same place. You will distribute the server within the building. Why? Because we're gonna put the server in a liquid. This liquid will replace the cooling of the server. You will cool the server thanks to the liquid. And we will take the heat of the liquid with a heat pump to heat, for example, the water of the building. Or if you are in a colder region, the heater of the building. So there is things like that coming up that will work. So I'd like to answer to the question about the water. It's exactly what you said. It's not anymore volume, it's value, it's quality. How do you do water desalinization? You do a huge investment somewhere, and because you've done a big investment, you want to amortize it over the years. And for instance, you need to produce 24 hours if you want to amortize it. What is interesting in the region is you saw the last bid, 21 cents for the last bid, Masdar and EDF in Saudi Arabia. Is the cost of energy becomes a marginal cost. So if you have a marginal cost in the region to do desalinization, we should have a look how we are going to use desalinization system. And you might have a cheap, affordable solution which will be completely green to do water.
if you solve the problem of water, you will completely change the region. And it's work for here, but it's work for everywhere in the world where you don't have access to water, which is key.
And Charlotte. Sorry. With another one.
Yes, just to answer also the question of the gentleman on how we connect the vision, the targets, and the achievements and the projects. Of course, the key is investment. So we need investment to flow, and we need private investment to flow. Of course, we can help with some public investment that can also play a leverage effect, but we know the bulk of the investment we need has to come from the private sector. And that is why the issue of investment is at the core of all our international cooperation, all the energy dialogues that we have in place with our key international partners focus very much on the issue of investments. And we are assisting the countries. We are sharing our experience in the EU, and we support our partners to set up the right regulatory framework to improve the business climate so that investment then can flow. And we do not do it in isolation. It's not only a government-to-government dialogue. We also involve the private sector in these dialogues and the financial institutions. So we need all players to be involved in our dialogues. And this is exactly the model of this platform that we have just launched in Africa for sustainable energy investments. It will be a platform of dialogue, putting together the policymakers, the industry, the financial institutions, and the academia. And I think this is the right model to pursue, to ensure that more investment is flowing. And we have already very successful examples in the region, in the Gulf, and also I was mentioning Egypt. Egypt has gone through a major reform of its energy sector recently. The business climate has tremendously improved. And as a result, we see now investment is now flowing to Egypt. So I think this is the right model to continue developing.
Thank you, Charlotte. And I think, Eric, you forgot the two
I forgot question two, which is very interesting, and to follow up what you said about investment. This is public information, so I can give you the figures. It's very interesting. The reason why we are doing that project, which is decentralized, distributed hydrogen production, is to actually to compare, to see if we can be competitive. So the goal is what? Is to have a private company which are doing delivery of goods within the city today with diesel trucks. We promise them to do the same with hydrogen trucks at the same price. So we've done a business plan. It's a 36 million project. This 36 million euro project will finance 400 vehicles, light trucks, heavy trucks, with a leasing system. We'll finance 33 distributed hydrogen stations. Thanks to EU, we got a 7 million grants. So 7 million is part of the economy of the project, which is the prototype, to make it happen. The rest is a non-recourse project finance, 20% equity, 80% debt with a bank. So we have to have a solid, real business plan. Yes, this is true today. We need a little bit of 7 among the 36 million grant to make it happen, but it's a prototype. And thanks to that, we will demonstrate that we are at the same price. The demonstration will be, if it works like that with volumes, we will make it happen. And second thing, which is important, don't think we're going to replace all the trucks, all the cars of the world with new cars, new hydrogen cars, new electric cars. There is two markets. Of course, there is new vehicles, but think about 2-year-old vehicle, 3-year-old vehicle, even 10-year-old vehicle. They're still valid to work. So we launch a huge process, and the European Commission is not aware of it, but we're going to introduce half of the vehicle will be new vehicle, half will be reshaped vehicle. Because we're not going to throw away all the vehicles in the world. So investment is a key thing. So I cannot answer precisely to the question, but the idea, there is maybe different models, And it's time for experimentation in the next coming years to see what will be the most valid model. But don't forget one thing, is independence, autonomy for territories, countries, to ensure its own mobility. So that will not be only a question of cost, but it could be also a strategic question of how do you want territories to ensure your mobility in the coming years.
You need a vision, you need enabling policies and regulatory frameworks to trigger the investments, and you need to be supporting also emerging technologies to get to that vision. Thank you very much. I think we can all applaud our three formidable speakers. And now we change the session. Guillermo, you would like to do a picture? You like to see what's the picture? Now, let's move to the third and last session of today's EU Energy Day. And here, what we have thought was to focus on the developments already taking place on the ground. And for that, we have invited a mixture of representatives from international organizations, as well as European industry experts operating already in this region, to provide them their perspectives, their stories, their experience, and to share their best practices with us. So, as already said, the European Union is already active and looking at sectoral integration in a number of concrete developments in terms of ways to see an increasing share of electricity in the final energy used in buildings, transport, and for heating applications in the industry. And of course, cost efficiency is one of the key drivers for this. We are also seeing the continuous roll out of smart electricity and smart thermal grids at both local and European level, and this to enable flexibility in the most cost-effective use and form of renewable energy across different sectors and applications. And last but not least, thirdly, more recently with the digitalization, to enhance the integration of variable and local renewables, and by enabling its better matching between the supply and the demand according to the specific climate conditions. So this is just trends that are starting, and that we are monitoring and supporting, and that we will see much more flourishing in the next decade. This is the aim of it. And this is essential for Europe to be at the level of responding and implementing its Paris Agreement. So now we would like to get your perspective on the role that cheap renewable power can play in connecting the electricity sector with the transport, heating and cooling sectors, and also the role of other energy carriers like hydrogen and power to gas can also play as key enablers for decarbonizing industry and the transport sector, and also the role of digitalization in smart infrastructures in both Europe and also the Gulf region. In order to kickstart this discussion and this reflection, I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Peter Therium for his keynote opening. Peter Therium is the lead energy sector in NEOM. Please. You want to speak from here? You have slides.
Yes. Thank you and good afternoon. That was quite an encouraging list of what we are going to cover between now and dinner. I'm not sure whether the time is sufficient to get all of that done, but let me start with a dream or a vision. And that starts with NEOM. NEOM is a artificial name, neo, new, And the M is an Arabic name that even after half a year I haven't learned to properly pronounce, so I'm not going to give it a try this afternoon, but it stands for future. So it's the new future, that is what it's about. And with NEOM we are creating the land of the future, greatest minds, best talents. I'm meeting there, empowered to embody ideas and boundaries going to be exceeded. And it all inspired by imagination. Now that is a very dreamful vision. What it's all about is, it's one of the 3 giga projects of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that is part of the Vision 2030, which transforms the country from a oil-based history into a new future that creates value for the citizens, specifically for the new generations of Saudi Arabia. Which is very clear, we've seen that on this marvelous chart with this one peak around 2000, that hydrocarbons are not going to last forever. And Saudi Arabia is a country with 40 million inhabitants, 60% of that younger than 30 years, and they need to have a future. Within NEOM we are looking at 16 key sectors. They have been identified, and they are going to be part of this land of the future, because land of the future is not only about ecology, about pristine nature, it's also about jobs, creating GDP, and for that you need more than only the service sector, tourism, and you need specifically industry. Now there are various sectors in here. Very clearly those are the sectors that we think we can offer benefits for in NEOM, because of the setup, the future-oriented setup, or because there are local advantages, call it resources. Very clear one is water. Not that there is that much water available, at least not on the land, but in front of the coast there is a lot of water available. And if you imagine that KSA is one of the largest consumers of desalinated water, although it doesn't have any industry producing equipment for desalination, that's a very obvious one where we can look at. Now the sector that I'm representing, the one with the green box around it, is another one which is very important. It's the energy sector, and of course I need to say that because I'm representing that sector. But there are 2 things available within KSA and within NEOM specifically that are pretty unique. Well, at least one of them is. The one that's not that unique is lots of sun, abundant radiation. The one that's a bit more unique is there is a pretty stable profile of rather intensive wind available. The wind over there, not like the region where I come from, is due to meteorological data or the weather. Wind in KSA mainly comes from the difference in temperature between day and night. We call it convection. And with that it is available 365 days, and not like in Europe, you either have too much, and that call it a storm, or you have too little, and there is no wind. So there are 2 resources that are available that we take advantage of to develop that sector within NEOM. Now, these are the common disruptive trends. I will save them for you today because you probably have seen them in various forms and formats today. So let me skip to what are we going to do within energy at NEOM. Well, we're going to do 2 things. We will build the world's most advanced renewable energy hub, and we're going to do the first at-scale fully renewable energy system. Let me start with the last one. Fully renewable is something that you might say, well, that's done before. I have an aunt or an uncle or any kind of guru that has his own farmhouse with a windmill in the back and some PV panels on top of that, and he's 100% renewable. Now, that's not groundbreaking. Well, not in that format. But has it ever been done for a complete city or for a complete land? Well, that is not the case. And that is what is groundbreaking about that. It's the scale at which we are going to do that. The land of NEOM, as I call it, is a territory in the northwest of the kingdom, which is as big as Belgium. So it is sizable, and it's going to have several cities. And to do something with 100% renewable energy over there and maximum electrification certainly is a pretty visionary thing. I'll come back to the global leading hub for new energy technology, but I also want to tap on later with 2 or 3 examples, clean energy intensive industries, because we talked about it's about job creation, it's about GDP. Well, as I said, people need jobs, jobs need industry. And if you want to tap into industry, why not start with the ones for whom you can offer a competitive advantage? And that are those industries that are energy intensive, or maybe even electricity intensive, and that have a specific need for clean energy. And there are a few examples of that, which I will, as I said, will show to you. The whole dream of NEOM is not a dream anymore. It's starting to become reality. At this very moment, the first construction camp for 50,000 construction workers is being built, and in the next few weeks, the first construction will start. The first village at the coast with a marina, 2 hotels, a golf course, some villas and some apartments and some other houses is going to be ready by the middle of this year, call it August, September, hosting some 4,500 people. And the second phase of that city, which we call NEOM Bay, is going to be ready by the end of next year. So it really is now from dream being brought into reality. As far as energy is concerned, there are 5 strategic concepts that we're working on. The first one is the residential energy supply that needs to be integrated in the architecture, integrated in the environment. We work with solar canopies, solar trees, all of that to make the whole living environment 100% renewable. We'll not reach that immediately from the scratch, but in 2030 we will be. But as I said, it's about more than only a living environment. And one of our Saudi people was here this afternoon. He talked about the new wind auctions that having been done, also about PV, and there is lots more to come. Saudi Arabia is embarking upon the largest renewable energy implementation plan ever in its history and comparable to none of the likes globally. Now, that kit needs to be manufactured. And what is easier than asking those suppliers in the contract to provide local content? Now, that local content will be concentrated within NEOM so that we can develop there I call it a renewable manufacturing city, a hub where PV, wind, batteries, and some other smaller niche spin-offs and kind of activities are being concentrated. So there are cross-border fertilization possibilities there. Think about hybrid applications as we see them in Australia, where wind and PV is combined. That is what we are setting up as new energy manufacturing. Also talked about the need for industry that is energy intensive, that is specifically clean energy intensive. We look at existing industry, call it data centers, that are very energy intensive. I tend to call to my CIO a data center not something which is IT. I say it's an energy contract with some bricks and some transistors in the attachment to it. Well, that might be a bit over the top, but energy is the main cost driver for a data center. And cost is an issue for the Googles, the Amazons of this world, but also renewable energy is. They're very weary about the shitstorm in social media that blames them about running their data centers with outdated fossil-fueled energy. So that is one existing one as an example. But the topic that is nowadays being discussed a lot is hydrogen, and then specifically green hydrogen. Now, in my view, green hydrogen or green molecules is the next wave of renewables that is going to come. The first wave was the electrification of sun and wind. But the inevitable disadvantages of that, you can't store it in large quantities at low cost, you cannot transport it over a larger distance without any major losses or at an affordable cost. So green molecules is going to be the next wave that can offer a solution for that. Now, why haven't we thought about that earlier? Well, that's pretty simple, because in order to produce green molecules, you need energy. You need lots of energy. And only with the first wave coming about to a cost level that we currently are at, we can afford to produce green hydrogen out of renewable energy. All of that needs to be in an optimized mix. We're talking about storage here, but if you combine PV and wind, then you already have a pretty optimal profile that very much matches the consumption profile of what is available or what is necessary in regions over here, and then you need only very little storage anymore. It's all about innovation. And the last point, the energy labs, it's not the least one. It's about not achieving a competitive position per today that will last till tomorrow. It's about creating an environment, and I will come back to the smartest brains and minds, that continue to guarantee that competitive position that we need. And that is not only about education, it's about R&D, but it's specifically about creating an innovative platform that can be tapping into R&D and education, but it also can tap into other regions in the world, because even if you want to make NEOM the globally leading energy hub, a lot of the examples that are on the right side of this chart are not exclusively related to renewable energy. So whether it's artificial intelligence or whether it is big data or any kind of blockchain applications, they will develop in other industries in other parts of the world. So it's about connecting to the places where innovation takes place globally. And that's where the circle closes, because with that, and with the example of tourism, that was one of the sectors, we open up the land of NEOM for other cultures, for other religions, also for no religion, to create an environment in which the best brains, the smartest people, the smartest talents can really thrive. A few examples I mentioned already. The list here is a bit more complete. We talked about water desalination and data centers. But if we talk about the transition to a renewable system, and if we talk about sector coupling, it's not only about producing electricity and mobility. We also need to address the emission issues that we have in the industry. A lot of that is process related, cannot be electrified, and hydrogen, green hydrogen, and its derivatives, whether it's ammoniac or whether it is methanol, can be a solution for that to produce green steel or other kind of green processes. The other sectors logically connect to ours: advanced manufacturing, vertical farming. But when we look at green hydrogen and the technology that is being used to produce green hydrogen, you are immediately in membrane technology, and partially you are in R&D areas that also can be a solution for direct air capture. Now, of course, it's the next phase, maybe the next dream of the future, to have a negative carbon footprint and take the CO2 from the air that we need in combination with the green hydrogen to produce products like ammoniac, methanol, and other green fuels. We do that, as I said, with the resources that are available: lots of sun, lots of wind, great minds, great talents. But what is specifically new about NEOM is that we do not have a legacy. And everybody who has ever tried to renovate his house to make it better and thinks that it is cheaper and it goes quicker than building a new house will obviously have had the experience that it is not that easy and it is not that cheap. Starting from scratch, having no current legacy available, being able to develop a framework, a legislation, a market design specifically focused for this purely renewable system is an advantage that is unique. And if you offer that advantage to startups, to great minds, good talents, as I said, where they can experiment with things that are not possible in an existing environment, then that is something that helps us to attract the people that we need to have to approach this challenge which is ahead of us and which is used. With that entrepreneurial spirit, we can indeed create jobs, localize future technologies, and contribute to the national GDP of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Thank you.
You may prefer to sit here, because then if there are questions, they will also be addressed to you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your keynote speech, Peter. And I would like now to call our dear panelists to come and join us, and starting with Paolo Frankel, head of the Renewable Energy Division in the International Energy Agency. Paolo, thank you very much for being with us today. Thomas Novak, yeah, you changed seats. Secretary General from the European Heat Pump Association. Thank you so much, Thomas. Robert Hoovers, business manager from Lightyear. He's not in the room, but I'm seeing him already. He's there, Please join us. And last but not least, Bruce Douglas, Deputy CEO from Solar Power Europe, and is also the coordinator of the resource platform. Bruce, thank you so much for being with us. I'd like to propose you the following. I'll give you between 5 to very maximum 10 minutes each. Very maximum, because otherwise you don't have time for questions. Right? So each of you makes a short presentation on the topic, and then we open for debates. I'm sure that will be many in the audience who would like to intervene, because I know what you present, how you present, and it will trigger a very interesting debate. So please, and we start with Paola. Paola, would you like to come here? Yeah, why not? Or stay there, as you prefer. Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting. I know that the session theme is discussion about advancement in sector coupling. So I would like to propose to change the title and to say advancement in smart energy systems. And I insist on the word energy, because I would like to remind, today electricity is only 20% of total final energy consumption. The rest is either heat or transport. Now, this means, at the same time, a huge untapped potential for more electrification, and at the other time, we should not pretend that the world will run 100% electric anytime soon. We will still need a number of, like my friend Thomas says, of molecules, and I'm sure we will discuss on this. Now, Peter said the first wave of renewables was wind and solar. The second will be hydrogen. I politely disagree. There will be many other waves in between. I would say at least 3 or 4. But hydrogen will come, and it is actually a very important one. The first, which I would like to make it very clear, and is a word that I have not heard yet, but I only joined recently. There is a lot of more of wind and solar that can be introduced without any kilowatt hour of storage. The key word here is flexibility. And flexibility, of course, depends on the structure and the network that you have on grids, on the flexibility of the other power plants, including thermal power plants, and then on affordable storage, but in particular something which is often forgotten, the flexibility of demand-side response. And here is where heat pumps come, and I will leave this entirely to him, electric vehicles, other forms of storage, so combining electricity and heat. The demand side is actually the cheapest part of flexibility. The only detail is that in most countries in the world, there is no market design for this. And so the value is not recognized, and this does not automatically come. This is number one. The second, the new uses. Renewables in industry has barely begun, with one notable exception that anyone tends to forget, which is bioenergy in paper and pulp and paper and other industries. Now, once again, this has two huge potential. One is direct electrification, again, heat pumps for heat processes in some industries, but also other processes that can use more electricity, very rarely spoken about, sometimes in the Nordic countries. And the second is the indirect with the hydrogen, in which our point is, and I was happy to see this in the presentation, it's not the model of the fuel cell car that the Japanese insist every second day to sell, but rather hydrogen-rich feedstocks and fuels. And it will start for industry. It will be the ammonia cycle. It will, for fertilizer industries or explosive industry, mining industries in Chile or other application, it will be methanol. Then you change one particular thing, which the problem of hydrogen is not the production, is the storage and is the transport. So if you have a liquid, like ammonia, then it becomes a commodity, and you open a completely new world for renewables. You produce a huge amount of wind and solar in the desert of Atacama, but also in Australia, also in this region. You produce a liquid through hydrogen-rich fuels, and this becomes a green commodity for the whole world. This is where we think it will start. And by the way, of course, hydrogen is absolutely not new. I remember my first work in the energy field 27 years ago on hydrogen. There was another spike in 2006, but this time is for real. The big difference is, at that time, the three usual suspects were always the same: United States, Germany, and Japan, for industrial and energy security reasons. Now you hear speaking about hydrogen in this region, in Chile, in Australia, in India, in China, everywhere. This is going to come very soon. The third point is something maybe not super relevant for the region, but that I still want to do it, is the other part that we look, the overlooked giant of renewables right now, which is bioenergy. And I would like to emphasize one point on bioenergy. It is usually linked to the concept that bioenergy is old, is unsustainable, is actually a problem, is not a solution. If it is used badly, this is true. But it is an enormous other bulk of innovation of new opportunities. I would like to mention two examples. One is very available technology like production of biomethane, which can be incredibly important to diversify the source and to use the existing gas assets, for instance, in places where this is an important part of the infrastructure that will continue to have value. And the second, if you look at more other technologies, think about aviation fuels, which have not immediately another alternative. Like there will be electric planes at some point, but not super soon. And the biofuels offer much more important and more concrete alternatives. And someone said, Eric was saying it before, there will be a lot of existing cars and existing trucks. And if you want to have much better sustainable performance of trucks in developing countries, the best thing that you can do is to run on biofuels. Now, once again, I stop it here, and I'm very welcome questions, but three parts: more electricity, hydrogen, and bioenergy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paolo, for being to the point and very concrete. I'm sure that it will lead to a very interesting discussion. And continuing, I'm now giving the floor to Thomas Novak. Thomas, 5, maximum 10, okay? Otherwise we don't have questions.
You're most generous, 10 minutes. We don't need that. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here and for having the opportunity to speak about heat, but also about an efficient, a smart electrification of heating. Because what we are doing as heat pump industry is we are providing an integrated technology that can bridge the two. But allow me 2 minutes to explain, no, not 2, allow me less than to explain what a heat pump really does. Because we are so much into that technology, most of the people on the stage also, that it always seems that it doesn't need explanation. But I want to make clear that you all understand why this technology is so great for the purpose and for this region. And when I started the job at the EHPA, my daughter came to me and she said, well, you know, what are you doing now? So what is this heat pump? And I said to her, it's like a fridge, but just the other way around. And she misunderstood me. She said, well, if you turn this around, then how can you still use it? And I said, no, it's not like that. It's the fridge is cooling, and at the backside of the fridge, you get the heat. And so we just turn this around. So we take the outside world, and at the inside of the house, we take the heat. Or if we use it in the Gulf region and other warm areas, we do exactly like a fridge. We use the outside world and to discharge the heat, and we cool the inside. So what you could say, in fact, is if you have a large enough fridge, you can heat your house. Or you could also turn that around and say, if you have a cooling demand, you get the heat for free. And these two things should be taken into consideration. We heard this morning from the colleague from Saudi Arabia that he said, well, we have these photovoltaic cooling devices already. And I asked him afterwards, do you also use the waste heat? And he said, no. So that's the thing. We need to connect the heating and the cooling part, and we need to do that in an efficient and a smart manner by using ideally green electricity. And what does that give us? It gives us 100% emission-free, CO2 emission-free and particulate emission-free solution. So it gives us clean air, it gives us a technology that is completely compatible with the Paris Agreement. It provides always heating and cooling. It can be used in residential, commercial and industrial applications and also in district heating systems. So we are seeing now in district heating increasingly often a problem that maybe the heat source is just disappearing because a coal-fired power plant is switched off. What do we do then? Denmark, for example, is now moving into the introduction of large heat pumps, and we talk megawatt. We talk up to 35 megawatt heat pumps, thermal energy in one block, and that can be multiplied, it can be scaled, and then you can provide the whole heat of a city with environmental or waste energy sources. As association, Paula has asked a little bit to explain what are we doing and why am I here. So we are basically the conclusion of all of this, that this is a great technology, but not so many people know about it. So we need somebody to push the marketing button and to present it in policy, but also in the marketplace. And as an association, we do exactly that. We are lobbyists. Very, very clearly in Brussels, we follow the legislative procedure, we influence the legislative procedure, but we also collect market data. So if you have an interest in heat pump data, you can approach me, and we organize events to disseminate the know-how a little bit further. In Europe, this potential is by now huge. It has been referred to repeatedly to the Clean Energy for All package. This Clean Energy for All package is final now, and it recognizes heat pumps across the board. What we find most important at the moment is the review of the design for the electricity market, because that introduces the right for a full flexible electricity tariff, and that creates a business model, and that's actually a connector. So if you ask, what should we do here in the Gulf Coast region and in other areas of the world, we do need these flexible tariffs that make a business case out of the demand side flexibility potential that also Paolo has mentioned that heat pumps can provide. Let me just say one other thing. When it comes to industry, industry is now addressed quite often as a sector very difficult to tackle. We have by now heat pumps that are in operation that can provide up to 200 degrees centigrade in a reliable manner. For sure, 160, and I have seen now the first projects that move into the 200 degrees centigrade direction. So you can ask yourself, this is too good to be true, and I can say, well, maybe yes, but the technology works. We see that the policy, that the framework, the political framework is of utmost importance to move it fast. And we see that in this context, it has to be asked if fossil fuel subsidies are still necessary, because they make it difficult, if taxation needs to be addressed when it comes to electricity versus fossil taxation, and if a CO2 price is not an important issue to be at least considered. And I know how difficult it is in this region, but nonetheless, it is something that will shift markets. And we need clarity from policymakers that there is a change that is necessary. We saw it from Arash earlier, this spike in the timeline. So if we have to change fast. We have to start the change fast, because this industry that I'm representing is very slow. So we have to make the announcement now so that the industry can adjust. With that, I leave it, and I'm looking forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And now I would like immediately to pass the floor to Robert Hoovers to tell us about your new, upcoming, very awaited product. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, I do so much agree with your remark about the clean sheet, and that's actually exactly what we're doing with the car. I'll start with a short
Earth, our beautiful little planet, a place to live, to discover, to travel. As humans, we have always loved to move around. For thousands of years, we've done it using the energy that Mother Nature gave us. We discovered that we could go further and faster by digging up and burning what nature had created. And now, we travel the planet like never before. The total distance we cover each year using fossil fuels is just over 9.5 trillion kilometers, 1 light year. Our goal is to let people travel the same distance using only the power of nature, before the year 2035. We set out to develop a car that directly uses nature's biggest source of energy, the sun. It is here today, tomorrow, and it will be here forever. As pioneers in this field, we have been building prototypes for years, with great success. And now, it's time for the giant leap. Traveling the distance of a light year, using only solar energy. That is our mission.
So that's what we're doing. We're actually developing the first consumer solar car in the world, in the Netherlands, with already 100 engineers now. We are 3 times world champions in this class. I don't know if you know, it is a solar car class from North to South Australia. To give you an idea, this car on the left has a range of 1,500 kilometers, and with 4 people sitting in the car, it could drive 70 kilometers an hour and was still charging, just to give you an idea of the energy balance and possibilities. Obviously, that is not a consumer car. This is the consumer car. We're already working for 2 years on this car. It's being designed in Italy by the former chief designer of Pininfarina. It's a solar electric family car with solar cells on the roof and on the hood, and it has a range of 800 kilometers. And in this region, you could drive 20,000 kilometers purely on solar energy per year. Where I come from, in the Netherlands, it would be more in the region of 10,000 kilometers per year, but still that's significant compared to the yearly usage of an average driver. It's based on a 60 kilowatt-hour battery, so the battery can obviously also be charged on a regular network. And this is actually what we're doing. Eh? So we are skipping the complete infrastructure and charging the car directly from the sun. So how do we do that? The way we do it is to design the car as a complete new concept, the complete system optimization. A large part of that is a redesign of the car. We have an extreme efficient car. We start with low weight, and using low weight you get into a low weight cycle. So you have a low weight car, so you can have a low weight drivetrain, and with a low weight drivetrain you have a smaller battery, and so you get into this low weight cycle. Then we use 4-wheel direct drive in-wheel motors, saving us a transmission, gearing, differential, and drive shafts. And all that gives us a huge design freedom of the car, where we can reach this 20 to 30% increase in aerodynamic drag, which is actually the most important part of the efficiency of the car. And I'm talking about a WLTP cycle. But having a car 2 to 3 times as efficient as every other electric car in the world also means that the car charges 2 to 3 times as quickly as other cars. So our car charges as quick on a regular power socket as an electric car on a special charging infrastructure. And that means that the blue area is our market. Because this world map is the map, the orange is the area where the charging infrastructure currently is working for electric cars. So, I'll finish up with another small movie.
Wow, can you feel the buzz? I do. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really thrilled. I think there's something in the air here. I would love to see this become really, really, really big.
I do think in a couple of years when you see these cars on the streets that a kid will turn his head and say, hey, look, that's a car from the future. And I think the best thing now is to show you the Lightyear one.
Not yet. In half a year, you have to wait. It's already there, but we decided to only unveil it when it's actually a working prototype. We want to show the prototype to the world, actually working, driving on solar energy. The car is already in the Netherlands, in the factory. You can have a look if you want, but you have to come to me and we'll make an appointment. Thank you.
You'll have a long list of people, huh? Thank you so much, Robert, for this presentation. And now I'll give the floor to conclude the panel to Bruce Douglas, please.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Thanks for the invitation. I'll use this opportunity maybe to respond to Paolo and to shorten a lot of the comments that have already been made. But I fully agree with you with the change of title of the session. Never been a fan personally of sector coupling. And I love the smart energy system. I'll focus more on smart than energy. But first of all, on the energy side, I mean, as a representative of the solar industry, we would advocate the full electrification of the energy system, primarily with solar power, obviously. Mobility and EVs is clear. We've just seen a great presentation of what's possible, but also it goes beyond cars. And one example is in Santiago, Chile, where the metro system is 100% powered by solar, and that contract, the PPA contract they signed, actually facilitated the building of a solar park there in Santiago. So just one example. On heating and cooling, clearly heat pumps have an answer, but there's a lot of opportunity there. And of course in the C&I space, so commercial and industrial space, and I'll come on to IKEA in a moment. I understand there was supposed to be a speaker from IKEA, but as the coordinator of the resource platform where we promote the sourcing of renewables for both commercial and industrial, I'll mention a few things about that. IKEA is a good example where they have rooftop solar on their shops. They have over 750,000 solar panels so far. They have wind turbines off-site, which they own, and they have more wind turbines than shops. They also have on-site storage for the excess renewable energy. They have an EV fleet, and they're aiming to have all deliveries from their shops, both with electric vehicles, but most importantly, with renewable-powered electric vehicles. And that's crucial when we talk about electrification. What is the electricity? What are the electrons that are going in? Are they green, brown, black? But they also are pushing heavily into their supply chain. So the example they are setting is pushed into their suppliers who can also electrify their demand through renewables. One important point on the smart element is currently, globally, and not just in the developed world, the energy systems are dumb. They are stupid. And I'm talking about electricity, gas, water, but also the control systems and monitoring systems that we have. We need to make them smarter, and we can do that through digitalization. We've done a lot of work at Solar Power Europe on the digitalization of the energy sector to combine both grids, buildings, C&I, cities, and communications into a sophisticated, overlapping, and smart system. We have a partnership with GSMA, who is the Global Communications Association, to try and also electrify, well, to put green power into their communication system, so a green 5G in the future. One word on storage. So, as was mentioned, short-term storage we can deal with through batteries and even EVs as they come online, and long-term storage through the production of hydrogen, as was mentioned by Paolo. And linked to that, the production of hydrogen through large-scale developments of renewables, both solar and wind, for example, in Chile, the Middle East, the Gulf region, or Australia, could produce like a solar fuel, hydrogen, to be used to be shipped, to be used for mobility and other uses, including high-temperature industrial processes in energy intensives, chemicals, cement, steel production. I'll end finally on a personal anecdote about the integration of different sectors and sector coupling. I personally am on a mission to try and couple everything in my house to renewables. This is a long and difficult process, as was mentioned earlier. It's not necessarily easy or cheap from a capital upfront cost point of view. But so far I've put solar panels on my roof, obviously. I've bought an electric vehicle, and to connect that to my house, I have a smart charger and a smart meter. I'm lucky in Wallonia in Belgium where I live, where I'm on a net metering scheme, so any excess electricity from the solar panels is put into the grid. It turns the meter backwards. Of course, when my car is there, it's charged from solar panels, but unfortunately when my car is not there, it's charged by the Belgian grid. And so although I'm on a green tariff, you can imagine that those electrons are hydrogen, nuclear, some offshore wind, but some gas from Germany as well. So it's a mixed bag that I'm dealing with. The next step is, of course, the heating. And, Thomas, we should talk afterwards about my heating system. But, on being on the national gas grid, there is a big issue of how I convert that to renewables. But we'll talk. So I'll end there. But as I said, a lot of opportunity, not just in Europe, but also in the Gulf regions for smart energy systems relying on renewable power. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for being with us today here. And I would like now to invite you, audience, here with us in Abu Dhabi, also those that are following us on web streaming, to come and give your thoughts. If you have any question or any comment to what you have just heard from Peter, Paolo, Thomas, Robert, and Bruce. So the floor is open. Please raise your hand if you want to make a comment. Yes, please, here in the first row.
Thank you very much. Faisal from Abu Dhabi, Department of Energy. It seems that, yes, we are also started to have decoupling and coupling at the same time. We are decoupling the existing facilities of producing power and water, and we coupling the solar to produce also, or to be used for water productions facilities. So it seems that in future there will be a large investment in this track. My question, to which level of, we call it magnitude, of the renewable energy can be participated in securing the energy? If there is any level of 50, 60, 70% of the current fossil fuel applications? And what will be the application if you go for 100% renewable energy, supplying the sectors? What will be the future of the fossil fuel applications in future? Thank you.
Thank you. I think Paulo will step in on that. I don't know. Yes, another question there. We take 2, 3, and then we go back to the panel.
Robert, I have to say congratulations, but I also have to declare a competitive interest because my son is at Delft, so they're your main competition usually in the World Solar Challenge. But congratulations on a job very well done. I wonder how you decided on the size of the battery, because it seems with a larger battery you could increase those numbers substantially, but then of course you add weight and all the rest of it. But can you talk a little bit about how you settled on that number?
Thank you. Any other question for the moment? No? Yes, 1/3 there. Yeah, the lady, yes.
Hello, I'm Neetu. I'm a student.
Could you put the micro?
Yeah, I'm a student researcher. I have a question to Paolo about when he recommended biofuels. Sorry, you can hear me now? Clear? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I understand that from aviation sector, yes, there is no alternative for the fuels. But if we recommend it to the other industries as well, especially for a product like biofuels, which creates a lot of human security and animal rights issues, plus food security issues, On an environmental ethics perspective, wouldn't it be better to stick to just biofuels for aviation and use other alternative resources for the other sectors?
Thank you. Well, I propose that we go back. Paolo, you have 2 questions, and then Robert.
But first I have to tell him I have no car anymore, and there's no my intention to buy. I may change my mind. Now.
We can talk about that.
Yes. Well, yes, I guess. It's, yeah. Anyway, I'm really impressed. Now, your question. The point is, of course, if you look at the potential of renewables, is overwhelmingly higher than all the fossil fuel production in the world. So from a technical point of view, absolutely no discussion, 100% renewable electricity, perfectly feasible. The rest of the system is trickier, but of course, if you then take into account bioenergy and hydrogen, you open new perspectives and further electrification. You open new perspectives that were unclear until recently. Now, all this will need time. It will not, it's not for 2 years or 3 years. And in this period, there is obviously a transition phase where the fossil fuels have a role to play. There is an important discussion in existing assets, and I would really divide the discussion between existing assets that risk to be stranded, and frankly speaking, on that, there is little interest in the transitions to misuse these existing assets. So the example of greening the gas transport assets is an important one. But obviously, this needs to be taken into account in a time vision where it's very clear that it is emerging that renewables could take the whole 100% in the longer term. And I think this is feasible. It will depend on where you are in the world, in which context, what is the existing infrastructure, what is the economic structure, where did this make any economic sense in a certain time frame. And we insist that we are under big time pressure and we don't have the luxury to disregard all options. For this region, I would like to mention that the first keyword should be energy efficiency, not renewables. It's energy efficiency. And for many regions, this is true. Other options like carbon capture use and storage are important. The carbon capture use actually is the link between the bioenergy world and the hydrogen world to do green hydrocarbons. There are a lot of options, and this is a technology race where nobody can say today who will win. I think we don't have the luxury to disregard any option and just to really compete all of those. But it's very clear, and you can see it in our long-term scenarios, that energy efficiency and renewables do the vast majority of the decarbonization. This is for your part. On the biofuels, of course, biofuels has a very controversial story, and it has been accused of many things. I would say, one, that obviously all biofuels use has to be under a transparent, fair, rigorous sustainability governance framework, which is possible. There are examples in the world, and it can be done. This is number one. The number two is that there is a low-hanging fruit in using waste bioenergy, in particular from municipal solid waste, from agricultural waste, different kind of wastes. I just was in China in November and realized for the first time how big the amount of straw that they burn. It's 1 billion tons per year, which is not just a non-used resource for bioenergy, it's also an additional source of air pollution. So you can, this is really a big part to be handled, The second is to go to advanced biofuels, which have two keywords, the biorefineries concept and the fact that with advanced biofuels, you use feedstocks that are not edible. So you will never have the competition with food. And I repeat, there is a huge innovation potential in bioenergy, which is completely overlooked, misunderstood, and it should not be overlooked in the future.
Thank you. I think you wanted to intervene on this point? Yes. Or, yeah? Yeah, okay.
I would like to give a different angle on this discussion, because what I've heard is one, what do we do with the fossil fuel assets? And the other one, what about the competition between the different non- and renewable resources? And my expertise goes on the building sector in this case, and I would like to stress that what we see is that, and that also maybe picks up a little bit of Bruce's problem, renovating an old house with a heat pump. We do have solutions available to do so, either entirely based on a heat pump or in a hybrid system. This is possible. So it leaves us with a very clear statement on the need for using fossil energy in heating houses and in providing hot water. And the answer from my perspective is no, we don't need to do that. So if we have a use competition, and if we want to use green molecules or biomass or biofuels in other applications, then the least where it's necessary is the heating sector. And that is very important, I think, because then we can focus and we can say, look, if we move to hydrogen, to green molecules, to whatever, then this should be used in transportation, in industry, and only if we have then provided all these needs and we still have something left, we can go to heating. But it's really not necessary.
Thank you. Peter, you wanted to comment on this, and I see also that you have questions on Slido. So if you could address those while you speak.
Yeah, there was one question which hasn't been answered, which was on the 100% energy mix. But first of all, I was getting a bit nervous when Robert said about the car with lightweighted everything. I think now he's going to talk about lightweighting the passengers. So didn't probably qualify me for a customer. But the now on how can we get to 100% renewable, it is within reach. Now, when we put up our vision, this was not, just a dream. We have done before we started the implementation the feasibility of that. And if you take, specifically in this region, you take PV, which is already at below $2 a kilowatt hour, going to 1.5 or maybe even less. If you take recent wind auctions, and if you then look at the wind profile, and if there's even better wind areas available, my prediction is that wind onshore will quickly go below the $2 per kilowatt hour as well. Then you have a mix with which you can cover 80 to 85% of the needs already, only with wind and PV. And then it needs only a little bit of addition to get to 100%. Now that a little bit of addition could be batteries, the conventional type of battery, a bit expensive, bit big if you need it in that size, but think about CSP, combined solar power, the heat solar power. Because if 2 years ago we were talking about that, it was at 10, 12 and more $cents a kilowatt hour. It's already now clearly below 10, 7-ish, 6.5. And if you only need it for covering, that storage element, because you can use it 24 hours a day, then you have pretty much a 100% renewable picture for the region over here. Now, for other regions, there might need to be other portfolios that you need to mix. It's either hydropower in Norway or maybe it is heat in Iceland. But specifically here, I think we're not far away from doing that. The questions on here is, if I might
yes,
just step on that, yeah, how applicable is your NEOM project to other regions around the world? Well, I briefly tapped on that. Other regions have other challenges, but also other availabilities. But all of it is about testing an environment in which 100% renewable is being exercised. It is proving that this is possible, challenging other people to follow, and with that develop some of the technologies that still aren't yet mature enough. And you've mentioned, Paolo, the topic of energy efficiency. Of course, that is one, but also the whole topic of energy management. Now, this environment with 100% renewable is going to be a rather complex environment. And you cannot manage that anymore manually out of a control room. You need artificial intelligence, you need big data, you need all of those things that we challenge people to develop at this clean slate approach where nothing else exists. So we need to develop that, we have the urge. And then we can, I think, copy and paste it to other regions of the world. And then, of course, there is the issue of green hydrogen. If we can, with the energy cost that we have in the region here, produce green hydrogen at prices that can beat the conventional hydrogen on price, then that's an export market. And whether you export it as hydrogen, that's not very easy, but it's not impossible. We've done more difficult things in mankind history, but you also can make out of green hydrogen the other derivatives. Yeah? For me, it was not about green hydrogen only, it was about green molecules. And all of those green molecules, whether it's fertilizers or whether it is green ammoniac or whether it is what have you, the basis of it is H2, is hydrogen. And that hydrogen is purely synthetic. So I'm not worried about the issue of biofuels. I rather would not like to use the word biofuels because it's purely synthetic what we are talking about. And for me, biofuels is either a temporary or a niche solution in certain areas where we don't know what to do with the waste or with the material anyway. Well, then do something useful with it and make some bio what have you out of it. But please don't use edible kind of acreages for producing biofuel, as we have the ability out of water with clean electricity to produce something which is much better. Quickly zoom through the other questions which relate to NEOM. I talked about green hydrogen. Will it require a 5 to 6 time increase of electricity generation? No, not that much. It's significantly less than that. But at the prices where renewable energy is going to get to, and this is, you know, what is currently available, if you just extrapolate the development of the last 5 years into the next 20 years, we're going to have so much energy available, we don't know what to do with it. So then at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether you need 5 or 6 times as much or even 20 times as much. No, it's not going to be the case, but there is so much available that it's better to use it in a very sensible way and to expand other carbon-intensive materials that we still have and that we just can't use in a proper way.
Thank you very much, Peter. Robert, you had also a question to you.
Yeah, the 30 kilowatt hour, no, 60 kilowatt hour question of the battery. Yeah, obviously 60 kilowatt hour. Yeah, but obviously all those kind of decisions, or weight, energy, relation decisions, is all a big compromise. You know, we know exactly what 1 kilogram of weight will add in energy consumption, but at the same time, you will need a certain range. You know, people love to have ample range in their car for those long trips. So we decided to go for a big range car, while it is easier also for us with a relatively smaller battery, 60 kilowatt hour, to have 800 kilometers of range. But obviously, looking at it from a purely efficiency perspective, which is important, it would be better to have a very light and very small battery. Yeah. Obviously, about Delft, I'm also from Delft, so and we have a lot of the people from Delft also in the company, so it's actually not a competitor.
Thank you so much. Any other question or intervention? Yes. There's another question. Okay, but there is one person asked for the floor. No, it's not translation. It's to listen to you.
Okay, two short points. One remark to Paulo's version of efficiency first. Basically, of course, it's important to do that, and particularly for this region, I would agree. Just saying, given that recent evidence is becoming more and more clear that we should hurry up cleaning energy production and cleaning up the atmosphere to provide climate change. 1.5 degree extra report from the IPCC. So I think we should try to avoid saying efficiency first. It's sure that there is a lot of potential to be tapped, But all the other solutions, green hydrogen or other forms of renewable energy, they are also there, and they should be applied in parallel. Second point was a question to all those supporters of green hydrogen, and partly I would be one of them. The question is, how do we avoid a collateral problem, as I would tell it, that those who go to production of large-scale green hydrogen production just use electricity which otherwise would have to be fed into the grid, but the grid system is not ready, and the grid operators are reluctant to do it. So don't you just take away pressure from modernizing the grid, or second part is, do you not just take away pressure from flexibilizing the grid? So, because when I hear models, let's just build offshore wind farms to produce green hydrogen and then ship it to the coast, then I would say, yeah, but why not use it directly with all these efficiency losses? So maybe some of you could comment on it.
Who wants to take the floor on this issue? Paolo?
I can.
Yeah.
I repeat efficiency first. I insist, and I start from your second point. I'm looking now at the efficiency of the whole chain, and it's obvious. You made the example of wind offshore. If you can use this wind offshore electricity directly for electricity, please go ahead. No doubt. The hydrogen route, however, is in regions where there is not necessarily such a huge electricity demand. And it opens a completely new story, which you go in the middle of nowhere, not in the middle of nowhere, in some places in Australia, where the demand of electricity would absolutely not there, you produce a liquid hydrogen-rich fuels, whatever it is, and you export it to Japan. That's the story. And this is a complete, then you are sure that you are not cannibalizing electricity, precious renewables electricity that you use directly. On your first point, I insist that we have an enormous still potential on efficiency end users. You're raising a good point at some point. If solar PV becomes at 1 cent, is it still so crucially important to have marginal efficiency? This is a good question. And the right narrative is that we will, in the future, more and more need to align energy efficiency and renewables better, in particular policies, than we have done in the past. But so far, I would stick with my point of energy efficiency first, please. Oh, yes, of course.
Okay. Bruce, you wanted to step in.
Just to say, if you asked if solar becomes 1 cent, it will. Just a question of time. But I know you agree with me. But just to reiterate to the audience, it is below $2 per kilowatt hour in many regions around the world and dropping fast. It will reach 1 and maybe lower. At that point, it's not just cheaper than new build fossil fuel. It's cheaper than existing fossil fuel plants. It also starts becoming cheaper than transmission. And then the question of, the level of disruption and the speed of disruption will accelerate. Thanks.
Okay. Paolo?
Yes, but then you have to make sure that system integration and flexibility is there in order to match supply and demand. No doubt on the PV at 1 cent, but you still have to have something at night. So is it a battery? Is it something else? It is whatever. I think that's the barrier. It's no longer the cost. That's obvious. Yeah. For both wind and solar, the cost is no longer the barrier. The next challenge, I would not even say barrier. The challenge is the system of a smart energy system, and I insist on the energy where you combine heat and power and mobility, which uses these now cheap renewables in the most effective way.
Paolo, the sector coupling.
Fully agree.
Yeah. I saw some hands. Yes, Peter?
Yes, on the infrastructure.
Yeah, there's a question.
It's a question on there, but also to tap on your issue. I don't think that currently using existing gas pipelines from wind offshore to bring it to the shore is something that leaves pressure away. I think the more fundamental thing, longer term, is an issue that you can't discard, is transporting electricity cannot go without losses. That's the law of physics. And you can use DC instead of AC, and then you reduce the losses, but they still are there and they are significant. The other thing is, it's not easy, because the question here is a truly global electricity grid. I don't believe it is going to come short term, and I don't believe it's going to come ever. Yeah? The reason for that is, if you transport hydrogen through a pipe, you have 15 times the energy that you can transport through a single pipe at the same cost as electricity. That can never, an electricity grid can compete with that. The second thing is that you have alternatives for transporting hydrogen. You don't have to do it only through pipes. You can use, specialized chips, and still the issue of storage is there. And I think there's one dimension that we have completely discarded in the discussion I've followed so far, which is industry. We talk about residential, and we talk about, some of the nice gadgets which we call a car, and we really don't need. We could use other means of transport, and we talk about PV on the roofs, but only 5 to 10% of the electricity consumption goes into residential. 5 to 10%. There's another 10 to 20% that goes to offices and trade and what have you, but depending on the society or the country, but between 60 and 85% goes into industry. Mm-hmm. And they have done a lot on energy efficiency already. With the way we've beefed up electricity prices, for them it was a sheer cost issue, and it was a matter of survival. So efficiency in those areas can add a bit, but not as much anymore as in the residential area. And for them, hydrogen might be one means of getting access to cheap electricity, which is available in other parts of the world in a form that it can be transported. And then we get also an ability to look at the non-electricity problems that we need to solve. Producing steel, but a lot of other chemical processes, they emit CO2 that cannot be replaced by electricity because it is process related. Now, they use mostly hydrogen as a catalysator for that. And if that is green hydrogen, you immediately have a very excessive improvement to the environment.
Thomas, very quickly, can you address the question that is there for you?
I will actually summarize some of these. Peter, I hope that actually industry can improve efficiency quite a bit, because we need some of that electricity in order to efficiently provide heating and cooling. And we have heard quite often, or I hear it quite often, this question, so if you want to electrify all the heating, then what do we do with the infrastructure? Because if you put a heat pump in every building, here it's an air conditioning system, so it seems to work. We heard earlier this day that it's a base load, but for Northern Europe, it's told that if you put a heat pump in every building, the grid falters. And I think that's why we're here. That's why you have invited us, because with a smart way of looking at this, and Paulo has picked it up, with a smart way of looking at this, we can provide this demand-side flexibility. And with a better building design, where the photovoltaic is on the roof and the heat pump is in the basement and provides heating and cooling and hot water, we can also release the grid from some things. And maybe I should add, in the commercial sector, IKEA is not only putting photovoltaic on the roofs and windmills outside, but they also have in every new IKEA market, you have a heat pump to provide heating and cooling and to make them a little bit more independent of the grid. And then the last thing, if we decide that we want to do this, then we start the planning now. And as much as the gas grid of the Netherlands has taken 60 years to be fully developed, and as much as they now have decided that they want to gas-free, we can upgrade and refurbish the electricity grid to its needs over the next 20, 30 years without any big problems.
Thank you very much. I think there is still one question to be answered. And Robert, could you give two questions? I'll start first with Robert. A simple and short answer to the first question. How is it possible that nobody else has done this before?
Yeah, how is that possible? Yeah, that touches on the importance of startups and of the clean slate, where we talked about. Sometimes you have to look at a problem from a totally new perspective and have the opportunities to start with a clean slate, and that's very hard to do in big corporations. Corporations like Volkswagen or the other big manufacturers, they have the responsibility for thousands of workers, and cannot take these huge steps. They have to make platforms for the coming 25 years, it's basically their legacy inhibits innovation, and therefore it's a very important role of startups to accomplish these things in small groups that have basically nothing to lose and just start and see where they go.
Thank you. Paulo, you want to take the...
Super short.
Yeah.
The question on biomass. Yes, obviously. The smart energy system will look all different in different regions of the world. In the northern hemispheres, forests have been steadily increasing. And the efficient way of using bioenergy in the Nordic countries, it's an incredible example of using a good resource in a good way. So it's not the same rule applies everywhere. The last part, how far we are from having a truly global electricity grid. So this is the state grid Chinese vision. This is a tempting idea, but there are very good reasons why we are very far away. The one is the losses. What makes sense, however, is to start from regional integration. And it makes sense, A, in hardware, but also in software and in market creation. And actually, I would add, it's a fundamental way to create economic links which then lead to peace, because the countries become dependent on each other. And the energy security becomes a collective exercise. This is an incredible tool for creating peace.
As the
in the
European
Mediterranean
Union,
area, I would like to remind this.
As the
right
European
now.
Union is doing internally and with its neighbors. Thank you very much. I think we have to come to an end to the panel discussion. Perhaps before concluding today's works, I would invite Frank to come here and just tell us about how you see this discussion moving forwards, how you see this being reflected in further activity of the GCC, EU GCC network. I think we'd like to also to get your inspiration. Thank you, and then we come back to thank you.
Yeah, that's a tall order, Paula. You know, I will resist the temptation of recycling, you know, many of the excellent ideas that we have been able to discuss today. But I do think, and you know, my personal impression is that first of all, it's an extremely exciting field that we're in, and it's extremely exciting time that we're all active in, because there is so much change coming and there are so many opportunities, but there is also so many choices to make. And I think part of why we're together is to exchange some of our thinking collectively and learn from each other. I mean, I've learned an awful lot today. I think collectively as a group we managed to avoid talking too much about blockchain. I heard hydrogen a lot, which is something that I'm very, you know, a big fan of. But other than that, the complexity of the new world of energy, which is reflected in the term sectoral integration or smart energy or whatever we want to call it, is tremendous, and we need every input that we can get to make the right choices. Because in the end, you know, you can do it like this, you can do it like that. There is many different ways of doing things, and having a platform that you know, that brings people together to debate and reflect upon some of the choices that we're, you know, dealing with on a day-to-day basis is tremendously important. And I think this has been fantastic input for the next coming years for the network. And I thank the European Commission, especially Paula and Anne-Charlotte for, and of course Angela and her team for organizing this. And I'm really looking forward to, you know, at least the next years, but especially also next year's EU Energy Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our panel, and thank you so much for staying with us. It's getting late, so I think we're going to close now. Thank you very much for coming, and I'd like you to thank our panel, our panelists who are here so enthusiastic discussing these matters. Thank you so much. Anne-Charlotte, tu viens faire la photo? Je vais prendre aussi.